Candid camera now.
Okay.
Okay, live stream is successful. Give it another minute and then I'll start letting the attendees in. All right, I'm gonna start letting people in. Oh, and I should make.
Thank you. I think.
Yep.
Hello, everybody.
Hey there.
Hi there.
Hi there.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Doug. Does it get cold there in Verity Park?
Not yet, but I
Okay.
had a couple
Haven't seen it.
had a couple of pigeons over my head. I'll have to change the seasonal. Yeah, this particular area that I am, verde, of course, means green, right? And so it's
It
staying.
does.
I'm changing.
It's quite lush.
But no rats, right?
That's right.
Good.
Maybe it's time I change my background. And Andrew, that's a great faux background of a bedroom. It's almost like you're actually in a bedroom.
It is.
I'm just kidding.
It's a living room.
Living room.
It should be from there. I don't know.
Do you unmute that one?
I have no idea.
Are they supposed to be able to hear me or no? Everybody's eating. That says mute.
How does it work with the phone?
I don't know.
Here.
Hello.
Hey, Rich.
Hey, Rich.
Captain, good to see you.
Why don't we get started? It is 6:32 according to my clock. Everyone, welcome to Manhattan Community Board 7's Transportation Committee meeting for November. My name's Howard Yaris. I'm one of the two co-chairs. Andrew Alpert is the other co-chair, and I guess Andrew will take turns going back and forth. But before we get started, the the task I like least in the whole evening. Is there someone on the committee who'd be willing to do the minutes for the evening? Don't all raise your hands at once. Anyone?
No one's dying to do this?
Barbara,
Oh,
Barbara's
Barbara, I
saying
saw
yes.
Barbara's hand. I don't know whether it was accent or not, but Barbara, are you willing to do
No,
it?
I'll do the,
Thank you,
Thank you,
Barbara.
Thank you so
Barbara.
much.
sure, you're welcome.
You have my undying gratitude. Okay, Andrew, we'll just take turns going through the agenda. So the first item up is a conversation about traffic enforcement with Captain, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Warby from the NYPD's Transportation Bureau. Captain Warby?
Yes, good evening. Also, Deputy Chief Michael Pilecki may be on the line. I know he was out in the field, so he may chime in. The connection may not be good, so he might be able to hear us and also maybe contribute. So I'll
Excuse me, Captain, I don't see him in the list of people who are in the meeting, but if he could identify himself some way, we'll be glad to promote him and hear from him. And we thank you for coming as well. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. So I'll just kind of tell you how I got here. I'm from the Transportation Bureau, which is located at One Police Plaza. And as the community board is aware of, over this past month, we've been having NYPD collaborative, sessions with the community. And recently we met with many of the residents and community boards of Patrol Borough Manhattan North. And we understand, and it's a good thing, that there was some questions that the community board raised at some of these listening sessions with the community where you're able to speak to higher ranking members in the police department. And as you see, it was a streamless process. They were able to forward your information right to the Transportation Bureau, which specializes in traffic safety. That's our world. And put me in touch with executive members. Obviously, Mr. Robbins is here, of your community board. So I was very fortunate to speak to this team, and I'll give you just a quick overview of kind of what the NYPD Transportation Bureau does in regards to traffic safety, and then we can maybe hear some more of your questions and concerns. So obviously, maybe you guys didn't know that the NYPD has a centralized bureau designed just for traffic safety, AKA Vision Zero. While each precinct, such as the 20th precinct and the 24th precinct, have a precinct traffic safety team, we have a centralized team as well that kind of oversees all the Vision Zero efforts, all the traffic safety efforts on both the streets and the highways pertaining to parking enforcement, truck enforcement, highway patrol, and of course, your average vehicle and traffic law violations committed on the street. You guys will probably be happy to hear that we're in really constant communication, constant collaboration with the patrol borough, each patrol borough headquarters, as well as the precincts. We conduct constant follow-up with them. There is constant data sharing. I know that was one of your questions. Was there ever a disconnect? Would the, let's say, the 20th precinct know what is happening in the 24th precinct? Because as we know, certain streets, certain avenues throughout the entire city, and they're in every borough, the collision-prone locations don't stop at a precinct border. They continue, and it's best when both precincts can address it, because as we know, and I think you guys also raised this, that drivers don't just stay in their one zip code. They travel from boroughs, from different states. So we look at this as a citywide, if not a statewide, and we collaborate with a lot of citywide and statewide partners to ensure that someone who maybe lives in your area and drives to Brooklyn for work, or lives in Brooklyn and drives to your area, or vice versa, or any combination of those, understands the importance of once they get behind that wheel, that lives are literally in the balance there. They're operating a heavy piece of machinery, and they must be extra careful for bicyclists, for pedestrians. We know how many school children, and it was true before the current pandemic situation, and it's, of course, very true right now. So I did want to at least let you guys know that your voices were heard, the community's voices, the community board's voices have been heard at the highest levels of the police department. And fortunately, we can have this session to just explain a little bit further to you. So I could open it up for any further questions you may have.
Thank you for that introductory passage, sir. Can you tell us, are officers dispersed on the basis of need, or is there a predetermined amount that each precinct gets?
Sure. So each precinct will have a traffic safety team. And on average, the team usually consists of 4 to 5 officers, and they are deployed kind of on a data-driven approach to where they're needed most. And of course, the sector officers, as you're familiar with, the response auto officers, can also assist in traffic safety. I think when I spoke to Mr. Robbins on the phone, I think we both agree that as a patrol officer who handles the 911 calls, sure, you could be focusing on a traffic condition and then be called away to a missing person, a domestic situation, or any combination of other 911 calls, which will take you away from that traffic. The traffic safety officers, for the most part of their day, provided there's not a huge emergency, have the ability to really focus on a specific condition, be it failing to yield to a pedestrian, failing to yield to a bicyclist, speeding, or other local command conditions that are brought to their attention.
Thank you. Thank you. I see Sarah Lynn's hand. Sarah?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for coming tonight. It's really interesting to hear about this. And apologize my ignorance. I just want to make sure, I think you just answered my first half of the question, but just to be sure. So officers who aren't traffic safety officers can still make traffic safety stops, like if they see something while they're on patrol, is that right?
Absolutely, they can and frequently do. That's the bulk of the enforcement.
Got it. And then for the traffic safety officers, those that are specifically assigned to do that, are they armed? And it sounds like they probably are, because they can then be also called to do other things. Is that right?
Yes, those are armed police officers, not to be confused with the traffic agents. And I'm glad you brought up that point, Ms. Lind, because we do have approximately 3,000 traffic agents throughout the city. And these are the light blue shirts that you see, and they mostly address parking violations, which, as we know, can contribute very heavily to traffic safety, be it blocking a bike lane, double parking, someone in a crosswalk, parking on a sidewalk. So that is a whole nother aspect of traffic safety that I'm glad you brought up.
Great. We have Ken Coughlin, followed by Doug Kleinman.
Hi. Thank you for coming to speak to us. I wanted to ask you about speeding. I know you mentioned it. Speeding is the leading cause of death for pedestrians and cyclists and motorists in the city. And a study was done about 10 years ago, estimating that somebody could speed for about 3,500 years in New York City and not get caught. So I'm wondering, do you address speeding? And what is the situation with speed cameras at the precincts and also in your unit?
Sure. So as you correctly pointed out, speeding is a major cause for determining the severity of the collision. As you know, if a pedestrian, like you mentioned, is hit at 40 miles per hour, which would be over the speed limit on the street, 90% of the time, 9 out of 10 of those pedestrians will die. If the pedestrian is hit at 25 miles per hour, that's why the speed limit, they now have a 70% chance at surviving. So speed is a major focus for the NYPD. If you were to go on maybe Traffic Stat 2.0, you will see this year in particular, and last year as well, a large majority of our moving violations, hazardous moving violations, are speed related. And that does tie in with the speed cameras, you're right, which are controlled by the Department of Transportation. So I certainly don't want to take credit for those. But even though that there's more and more speed cameras in each neighborhood, especially by schools, we still continue to focus on speed enforcement, maybe not just where that speed camera is set up. We don't want to, since the speed camera is covering, you could say, that particular post, we go on to another post. So we work hand in hand with the speed cameras. Clearly, a machine can issue more violations than an officer, but certainly we play a big role in speeding. We can check them to see if they have a suspended license, to see if they're intoxicated, or anything else like that.
Captain, while you're on that subject,
I apologize.
Captain,
Right.
while you're on the subject of speed that Ken raised, does your department have any input with DOT as to the suggested placement of speed cameras?
You know what? We do work very closely with DOT, including on the speed cameras. However, I know they're mostly engaged with a lot of the community boards, the elected officials, and I know they're somewhat limited where they can go based on the radius to a school and how many could be at one location. We don't get too deep into it with them, but I can truly say that our bureau meets with the Department of Transportation almost on a daily basis. I would say about 3 to 4 times per week, about a wide array of topics, and something as simple as a neighborhood-based complaint. So your complaints are heard at the highest level of DOT as well.
Thank you.
Can I just interject something about speed as well? I have seen on a few occasions, and I know I'm not alone in this, a huge caravan of people on alternative vehicles. I don't know what they're called. They look like motorbikes.
Okay.
Blaring down the street, going through red lights. And I've seen police stand by and not do anything. What's going on with that?
Okay, it sounds like you're referring to something that's maybe 3-wheeled, part motorcycle.
Yes, exactly.
I think
Are
it's
those even
called
legal?
a spider. Some of those are. The ones that have license plates, they are. Then there's the all-terrain vehicles, which might be known as a quad, something you would see on like a dirt road. Those are not legal. We do take motorcycle enforcement very serious. And there are certain times where you're right, where a vehicle may be speeding so fast that we don't engage in a pursuit at that particular moment because it may further endanger that person who's speeding and now other community members. Like that person may be going, let's say 50 miles per hour down a street. And let's say an officer does see him. And if we were to pursue, he would then start maybe driving on a sidewalk, especially with some of these all-terrain and alternative vehicles. So we do try to be tactical in our approach to apprehend them. And I've seen plenty of videos, especially in Manhattan, northern Manhattan, in your area. Some of it is extremely concerning. I will say enforcement action is taken against them. Clearly not as much as we would like, clearly not as much as there could be. But enforcement action is absolutely taken against rogue motorcyclists.
Okay, but what I'm talking about is a caravan of literally dozens of these vehicles brazenly going through red lights and not being stopped at all. It was a colossal menace, and I know there are other people who've seen this. I just don't know I've never seen anything being done to stop it. I was just wondering if your department is aware of this menace.
We're absolutely aware. I've seen many of the same videos you have. I've seen it in person. Oftentimes when it's, let's say 100 of these, and that isn't an exaggeration, dozens, okay, maybe 100. I agree. There are certainly high volume. Many times we might not be able to stop all 100, and maybe we're able to get a few of those who are able to stop safely. And that's the key. Who can we safely apprehend without further engaging in a pursuit?
They are really loud too. You can hear them blocks away. You can hear them in New Jersey, I think.
It is also a quality of life issue. Yes.
Just a follow-up question on the speeding. Do those precincts have enough speed guns, or are there some precincts that, I think we had one precinct tell us they had no officers trained in how to use them?
Sure. So I can confidently say that all precincts have enough what's called LiDAR guns, radar guns. If they ever needed more, they know who to call. We distributed hundreds of them. And there are an appropriate amount of officers in each precinct trained, especially those traffic safety officers. As you might imagine, speed enforcement takes a little extra time to kind of set up legally to observe the vehicle and issue the violation. It's not something that can just be observed like a cell phone or a seatbelt violation. So a lot of that speed enforcement is handled by our traffic safety officers in the precinct.
Okay. Doug, finally, you got to go.
Well, Howard, you stole my thunder, which was exactly the same question I wanted to ask, and I'm going to add to it a little bit, not to be redundant, but I observe these rogue motorcyclists and ATV nightly, This has been going on for months, every single night, almost without exception, multiple times a night, because they will go up Amsterdam, down Columbus, down Broadway, up Broadway. And I have been in close proximity to them. I do have videotape and photographs. Many of them are not registered vehicles, or if they are, they've removed their license plates obviously for concern of being caught. I have been actually in conversation with police officers and actually higher ranking officers while they've gone by and literally said, "Hi, fellas," and there's nothing they can do. We're not allowed to pursue them. We're not allowed to do anything. So I understand how dangerous a pursuit can be, and I understand the rationale for not doing it. But I would actually ask you respectfully, Captain, what can be done? You know, there's an old expression, there's nothing faster than a Motorola. And what type of intelligence, what type of methods can you use to apprehend these rogue bikers? I even dare call them bikers, because I do believe it's not going to be a question of when or if, it's going to be when there's going to be a fatality, if there hasn't already been accidents that are unreported. So this is not something that is once in a while. This is nightly, multiple times a night.
Yeah, I hear it.
What type of techniques can you use? And and also I'd like to follow up just to say, to date, how many of these bikes have you taken off the streets? How many arrests and citations have you issued?
Let me just pull up a few things. I'm going to begin with letting you know that there's been 43 motorcyclists this year that have lost their lives. 43 motorcyclists that have lost their lives. And as you might have hinted upon, these individuals may ride between boroughs. The individuals that you describe riding maybe 100 or 24 or 36 at a time may not live in this particular community board. They might not live in the 20th or 24th precinct. So once again, it brings us back to our point that this is borough-wide, if not citywide. These are individuals that may come from the Bronx over one of the smaller bridges. And 43 of these individuals have lost their lives. And as we also may have pointed out, when they get into a high-speed collision with a vehicle, they're usually on the losing side of that collision. When we see these 43, it's not that they're hitting other bikes. Some have hit pedestrians, yes, but it's mostly them either hitting a vehicle or wiping out and losing control of their vehicle. Enforcement-wise, one of the best tools in our toolbox is prevention. And towing these unplated, unregistered vehicles while they're parked is one of our better tools. This way, we do not have to pursue the person that would endanger them or someone else. And when we bring this unregistered, unplated motorcycle to our tow pound, which we have in each borough, in order for them to get it back, they have to come with the license plate, the registration, the insurance, the proper license. So I don't know if you saw that video by former Police Commissioner Bill Bratton where he crushed the motorcycles in a bulldozer. So that is one of our best tools. As far as how many motorcycles we towed and how many summonses we issued, I would actually have to dig a little bit for that data. I will say one thing. We are fortunate enough to meet with what's called the Motorcycle Advisory Committee, which is comprised of experienced professional motorcycle riders that own schools. So it's being addressed from a community aspect as well. However, these motorcyclists are very professional riders. We're having trouble reaching out to these youths that would go out there, blast their music, disobey red lights, ride on the sidewalk, have no license, no license plate, and have really disregard for the community that I don't want to say that they live in, but that they're riding in and visiting in. So the $1 million question that I could use help with is, how do I reach these individuals? Because I really don't want to put them, they're putting themselves in the morgue, and we don't really want to put them in the criminal justice system. how can we correct these guys and put them on the right track? And that's the $1 million question. I unfortunately do not have the answer to it.
Following, just for clarification, you said 43 people have lost their lives, and I'm very sorry to hear that. But are we talking about 43 law-abiding motorcycle licensed drivers, or are we talking about 43 of the rogue, unlicensed riders?
There is a split. There is a split because we've had some very professional riders that were out for a Sunday afternoon ride, especially in the spring. And they unfortunately wiped out when they made a turn on, say, the Cross Island Parkway. So it is a split. I would say about 50-50. And of course, we never blame the victim. But yeah, we've seen it where they've had a stolen bike, no license, no registration, no insurance. That kind of speaks to maybe the rogue rider. And then we've had some individuals that were ultra professional, had been riding for years, everything valid. And they were just out for a weekend ride, maybe visiting family or friends in Long Island, and on their way in, say, Queens or the Bronx, somehow hit a guardrail or went down on a wet pavement. So it is 50-50.
All right. And my last point, I don't mean to monopolize this, and I really appreciate your time and you being here this evening. I guess just for clarification, obviously the point was made, speed is deadly. Mm-hmm. And clearly the risk of someone perishing, the greater the speed, it exponentially increases. But I would also like to add that when someone is going the wrong way, if someone was going the lawful speed of 25 miles an hour, but happened to be going in the wrong direction and collided with someone else who was going the proper speed, you now have a 50-mile-an-hour collision.
Head-on collision.
And right. And so there is a huge problem with not only these motorcycles that I just mentioned, but there are bicycles and other alternative vehicles that are going the wrong direction and may hit each other or a pedestrian or a motor vehicle. So the opposite direction doubles the speed. And that's just something I'm very concerned about.
You know, Doug, I'm glad you brought that up about the bicycles, because each time that I'm fortunate enough to attend these type of community meetings, many people raise the issue about the danger of delivery cyclists, the danger of bicyclists maybe going the wrong way, running a red light. And I hear that. I've heard it so many times. And I just checked the data in Manhattan North. And this year, 84% of pedestrians that have been injured in collisions were injured by motor vehicles, trucks, SUVs, cars, etc. And 16%, and not to say that 16% is nothing, have been injured by bicyclists. Of the 6 people that we've unfortunately lost in northern Manhattan to traffic deaths this year, 5 of them were killed by a car, truck, SUV, and 1 of them was, for what it's worth, killed by an electric bicycle. So I would never minimize that, but the 84%, the 8 out of 10, the 8.5 out of 10 of pedestrians that are injured seem to be injured by the vehicles, cars, trucks, SUVs. So that's kind of where we focus our enforcement. But trust me, especially from persons in Community Board 7,
by the way,
we've heard it.
The motorcycles are going up Amsterdam Avenue right now. I don't know if you can hear it.
I believe it, especially since the weather is 68 degrees. During the winter, naturally, we see a drop in motorcycle fatalities. And come April, especially in April when they're unfamiliar with the riding, it is. So I don't doubt that. But we do have an enforcement plan in place, and we need more help.
Thank you very much.
Captain, do you ever take license plate numbers of motorcycles that you see operating in an unsafe or a bad manner, and then follow up with the owner of the vehicle?
We do. It takes a long time to develop a case like that, but yes, let's say right now we see a motorcycle or a car committing an egregious violation. We will take the plate. We will then see where that vehicle is registered to. We will tow that vehicle. And then when the owner comes to pick it up, we will address the situation with the owner to determine who is the individual responsible for that behavior. It can be, as you know, very time consuming.
Yes. And what is the penalty for operating a motor vehicle without a license plate?
Okay, so operating a motor vehicle without a license plate would actually be a summons. It can be a parking summons if we see it parked. It could also be towed. And if we see the person driving, they would be stopped, they would be summoned, and they could also be temporarily impounded if that was the only violation.
And temporarily impounded meaning the person gets their vehicle back at some point?
They would have to come to, say, the precinct or the tow pound with the license plates, and we would be more than happy to return it to them, provided it wasn't stolen or something.
And how many violations of that sort of behavior before you actually confiscate it for good?
You know what? I do not believe there's a threshold of when we confiscate the vehicle permanently, because that is someone's property. Usually we would do that for DWI, is when we take a car and we would initiate forfeiture proceedings, or if it was used in a crime, let's say it was transporting.
Right.
Now we're going off traffic safety. But the only time we take someone's car and not give it back would be like a drinking and driving situation.
Yes.
Okay.
We have other hands. Yep.
Jay Adolph, followed by Natasha, followed by Barbara Adler. Jay.
Yeah, Captain, you started a discussion on what I was going to ask about, excuse me, which is bicycles.
Okay.
My understanding has always been that when you're operating a bicycle, you're subject to the normal traffic rules. You have to go the correct way on a one-way street, stop for red lights, yield to pedestrians, etc. Do you, does the NYPD or your unit have any policy when they observe bicycles going through a red light or a stop sign or the wrong way? And just for some context, we've had many discussions at this committee and on our board on bicycle related issues, bicycle lanes and enforcement and operation in the parks, et cetera. And we've actually from time to time had cyclists who very candidly have told us that if an intersection is clear, they don't see any reason to stop and wait for a red light to turn green or stop at a stop sign, et cetera. So again, do you have any enforcement policy? If one of your officers saw somebody going through a red light on a bicycle, would they stop them? Would they summons them?
Well, you are correct to say that for the most part, bicyclists, including throttle-powered bicyclists, are subject to the vehicle and traffic law. However, there has been some recent legislation that allows bicyclists to temporarily stop at a red light and then be guided by the pedestrian indicator. It's called a leading pedestrian indicator. There are certain locations where a bicycle must stop at the red light. However, when the walk signal for the pedestrians that traveling in the same direction turns on the walk sign, it allows them to go through that temporary red light. But I know that's not exactly what you're talking about. I'm going to get to that in a minute. This allows them to be more visible and to get a little bit of a head start. But I think what you're talking about is when, let's say, the light is green going north and south, and say they would go through a light east and westbound when they would have the walk sign.
Yes.
And
an obvious.
So they are subject to enforcement. And yes, we do take enforcement action against that. Now, we have a finite amount of resources. And in the precinct, we encourage our officers to really focus on protecting the bicyclist, protecting the pedestrians from the vehicle. As we mentioned earlier, most of the injuries to bicyclists and pedestrians are based on vehicles. Not all of it, though, not all of it. So most of our enforcement, and I testified to this, about 90%, 97% of our traffic summonses are written to motor vehicles, cars, trucks, SUVs. And then about 3%, as I testified to, are written to bicycles. So we still want to correct the condition with bicycles. We want them to stop at the red light, and even, the most staunch advocates agree that they should stop at red lights, not be on the sidewalk. So that is where we focus on. We focus on the cars, trucks, SUVs committing a violation. But yes, we do focus on the bicycles that commit violations at time. We try to go through a lot of education on that to inform them, especially as more delivery cyclists during the pandemic and stuff like that. I think that covered most of your points there.
Yes, thank you.
Natasha and then Barbara. Natasha, you have to.
Hi, yes. Thank you very much for being here tonight, Captain. I had a few questions. First of all, could you talk a little bit about the recent budget cuts in the department and the reform actions and how those have affected your team from doing their job on a daily basis? My second question was about e-vehicles. My understanding is that they are still illegal. But I see them more and more on the street. I think since the pandemic began, many people invested in e-vehicles. And so I was wondering if you can talk about enforcement against them. Are they truly illegal, or are they now accepted? Are they legal? And the third thing, I didn't even have this on my radar, but since you just spoke about this change in legislation about bikes and the red light, and it just sounds like a very confusing rule, not very intuitive. And I'm wondering what sort of education or outreach you've done in the community for both like motor vehicle drivers and the biking community to make them aware of this change in legislation, because I certainly wasn't aware of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. So I'll start with the first one about the budget. I would probably defer this one to maybe some of the even higher ups in the department. But what I can say from our bureau, yes, there has been budget cuts, but we have remained laser focused on the Vision Zero mission. And now more than ever, we must do more with perhaps less. We must realize that this is reality. And we must realize that now we have to alter our enforcement strategies. And that is why I said, with our finite amount of resources, it is now more important than ever to really be data-driven, focus on the locations where bicyclists and pedestrians are getting injured, and deploy our resources there. We don't know what next fiscal year budget will bring, but I can say is we don't watch the budget, we don't watch the bank account. Of course, we must be fiscally responsible, but we get the budget and we act on that budget. Sure, of course, we wish we could deploy more officers for traffic safety. Every unit wishes they do. I'm sure the narcotics unit has their things, but from a transportation aspect, we will continue to serve with every resource that we have, even if it's a slightly less amount of resources. And we will be more fiscally responsible than ever, not that we weren't in the past, to make sure that we stretch our resources and stretch that budget to every community across the city. Number two, the e-bike legislation. So it can be a little bit confusing. November 23rd is when these micro-mobility devices officially become legal on the streets. Now, it was already signed into law, so they are legal today, but they are still subject to violations today. So technically, one of these throttle-powered e-bikes could be eligible for a summons today. But, we realized that in about 2 weeks, I'm looking at the calendar, literally 2 weeks from yesterday, they become fully accepted, fully legal. So what are we doing? They still must stop at red lights. They're just like a bicycle. They're just like a car. They must stop at a red light. They can't ride on the sidewalk. They can't ride the wrong way. So they could still get a ticket like that, but we don't want that. We want them to comply with the rules and regulations for their safety and also for the pedestrian safety. Because as I mentioned, there are still more incidents than we would like where they do contact the pedestrian. And that was that 16% in Manhattan North. And that's nothing to scoff at. That is still about dozens of people that have been injured. And I don't want to make light of that. That is still dozens of people that have been injured. And those are preventable collisions. Those are preventable collisions, even though those individuals, with the exception of one, did not die. Those injuries are still significant. That's a doctor's visit. If it's elderly, youth, whatever, those people may now be mobility limited themselves. We definitely don't want that. As far as legislation, we there's kind of a pending legislation, some of the newer one. There is a lot that comes out, and we put it on our Twitter page. If you happen to follow NYPD Transport, you can go there now. You'll see one about the new rear seat passenger seatbelt, the rear passenger seatbelt requirements. Hey, is it something that, to broadcast, across the nation? No, but it's important, and it's something for motorists to know. It's on our Twitter page. I know the newspapers had it. Some of the newspapers had it. But that's usually the way we get it out there, through social media, through meetings just like this, hoping that you guys can leverage your community board. And I see there's 67 participants, that everybody can share on it. Some things are cyclist specific, which we do more outreach in combination with DOT to some of the biking organizations, such as the bicycles being allowed to use the leading pedestrian indicator at intersections that are equipped with it, where they can use the pedestrian walk signal to get that 7 or 8 second head start. But yeah, legislation, it can change, and we always take whatever avenues we can to highlight.
Okay. Who's next? Barbara.
Yeah, hi, thank you. My question really concerns number 3 in our agenda tonight, having to do with West End Avenue, Open Street, but I'd really like to ask you this question in case you're not here. But if you will be here, I can ask it later on.
You might be best to ask it now.
Okay. I've noted that there are barriers at the end of each street, but cars are whizzing through there, and they're zigzagging back and forth, and they are really treacherous. I don't see many pedestrians there anymore since the weather has cooled, but I'm wondering if enforcement is being done there, because it just seems like a disaster waiting to happen.
So, yep, I'm pretty familiar what we're referring to. Throughout the city, there are these shared streets, open streets, where it is for pedestrians to exercise more space in their community. And vehicles are allowed to locally access it. For example, if someone had a pickup, drop-off, delivery, or they lived on that block, they would be able to access the block at a 5 mile per hour speed limit.
Right.
So there would be no summons for necessarily accessing the block. However, exceeding the speed limit on that block, and the way you describe it, and I don't dispute it, they might be going more than 25 miles per hour, let alone more than 5.
Well, 5 is permitted.
Correct. 5 is permitted, right. And the way you're describing it, I think they might be going 35. So,
right.
Either way, it's unacceptable. We do work closely with the community partners now. I'm not ultra familiar with this, and I'll let you maybe address it later. I see the other precincts are on here about how it's staffed. Sometimes the community board or a bid, I kind of, are involved with them citywide, and some of them are managed by various bids, community boards, and some are managed by just residents of that block who move the barriers at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. So this is something that, could be follow-up. It's not unique. The program is very beneficial. Many people like it, but clearly in order for it to work perfectly, which it must, we need to tweak it.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Steve Brown. I would just add that we really appreciate the captain's time, but we're running short. So if we could keep the questions to an absolute minimum, anyone who's spoken, we can't. If you've spoken already, I'm sorry, we can't have a second round of questions, and we'll take some questions from the community. But we really have to move beyond the first item on our agenda.
I'll do my best to be quick, Howard.
Thank you.
I just wanted to bring up one use case that I think is specifically unique, particularly with COVID and the outdoor seating, and that is delivery vehicle. And I brought this up a couple of times. Delivery vehicles, particularly the electric ones, going the wrong way in the bike lanes. I think it's very, very dangerous, and it also, particularly when you start to get long barriers where there's wood up against the delivery and it's a left or right. And I don't know what the stats are, and maybe they don't justify it yet. But there's no stat for people pulling over. There's no stats for myself, and I'm a big biker. My son just saying I don't want to bike anymore because between 6 and 8 he's nervous. I don't know if it's come up. I'd like to just bring it up. People know I brought it up in this meeting before. Just that specific thing, and specifically going the wrong way, I think is a challenge. And I understand that 85% of the people are transportation and should do so. But I do think it's a case that I just wanted to bring up that I think it's a challenge, particularly with the new outdoor restaurants.
Point made, and we definitely want to keep the bike lanes clear, unobstructed, so they don't have to go around cars, but we fully support the safe operation of bicycles when they're around pedestrians, no question.
It's a difficult enforcement issue. Why don't we take a couple of quick questions from the community, and Peter Arneson is first.
Arneson.
I'm sorry, Arneson. Sorry. You have to unmute yourself. Peter?
Yes. Hi. Thanks very much for being here, and thanks for letting me ask a question. We have an open street for restaurants, and we are seeing cars coming through there. We've also had the experience with the motorcycle groups, the ATVs. I guess my main question is that I know that this is not something that the local precinct is going to be able to address. Is there an alternative that you see? I had posed the question of whether the parking meter police could be engaged in this. I don't know how that could happen, but I'd be very much interested in hearing whether you have any other alternatives.
Sure. There's definitely a lot to unpack there in your suggestion about maybe the traffic agents manning them. That has reached the highest levels. It seems the most successful open streets and open restaurants programs, and I know not every community has the resources to do this, but some of the photos that the community sends me, it seems like, especially with the restaurants, there is an individual, maybe that's from the bid, that kind of takes control of it and sets up the barriers at the beginning of the shift. Or maybe they just designate, okay, Peter's restaurant. Let's say you're Peter's restaurant and I'm Eric's restaurant. On Mondays, Peter's restaurant is responsible for setting up the barriers and just assigning a staff member to make sure that they haven't been compromised. And then maybe on Tuesday, it's Eric's restaurant, and then myself and one of my employees periodically check that. That seems to be the best practice when it comes to open restaurants. And I'm fully aware that there's been some incidents where a car has actually hit a seating arrangement in a restaurant. Thankfully, there's not been really a serious injury, although all injuries are, of course, serious, but not a life-threatening injury so far. So that is something that we're monitoring. I can't say it's been an epidemic, but it has happened. The pizza place on the Upper East Side comes to mind, and a few places. Greenpoint in Brooklyn. Yeah, Greenpoint, Sunset Park. There's been some ones.
So I run the Columbus Amsterdam bid, and we do that with a stretch of Amsterdam. This past weekend, I lost 6 police barricades. They were crushed under vehicles. I was hit on a bicyclist, as a bicyclist, where I refused to get out of the way of a car, and they hit me, but that was my choice. But it is something that I'm seeing more and more with cars just going very fast, and it's not just cars. It is also the electric vehicles and the motorcyclists. Okay. And I'm just feeling a real need for increased enforcement in some format.
Point well made. Speed enforcement is at the core of the NYPD's traffic safety program. That and fail to yield to a bicyclist, fail to yield to a pedestrian. Those are our leading causes: speed and fail to yield.
Thank you. Sanjeev, then Ira, and then Rich.
No, I'm
Robbins.
sorry. There's Andrew Rose. I promoted a couple of people in anticipation of your
sorry.
calling on them so they could be heard. So that's
ahead.
Peter Joel said. Andrew Rosenthal is next. And I believe that Sanjeev wants to talk about 73rd Street, which is a very different item that's not on the agenda. So that probably has to be new business.
Okay.
So Andrew Rosenthal, and then I'll.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Captain, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
I have a car that I used to keep in a lot pre-COVID, and now I'm doing alternate side of the street dancing. And I seem to be the only one doing the dance. So I go out and move my car, and I look at the block, and nobody else does. And so the street sweeper comes by.
Okay.
Everybody's sitting in their car, but nobody moves. And the street sweeper cannot do anything and just goes up the block down the middle of the street. And this happens again and again. There's been virtually zero enforcement. The only tickets I see are for cars where no one's sitting in it, but there's no ticketing for people sitting in their cars and not moving.
I've seen that on my block too.
Yeah.
We've had a new group was formed this summer, one block on the Upper West Side. I'm reading from the West Side Reg that 280 volunteers have adopted over 100 blocks. So clearly there's a street cleaning problem, and I think it's very fixable.
Absolutely, Mr. Rosenthal. I hear you. And one of our more common summonses for parking violations is the alternate side, because it's so common. And I appreciate you bringing this to me. I was looking at the numbers and it looked pretty significant to me, but I take your word that some maybe traffic agents are maybe passing over vehicles that are in violation that have someone sitting in it. I think a good answer to that would be, and a good response in a program going forward would be to instruct that person to move. Not give them the summons perhaps, but since they are capable of moving, move. And I know there are talks, as I know you guys are involved in, about somehow shortening it where when the street sweeper passes, maybe the cars can go back so that people aren't waiting in the cars. But
right, but that was the old way. But right. What's happened now is people literally do not move. Virtually 100% of the blocks are filled before the street sweeper comes. And consequently, no street sweeping is happening in my neighborhood. I mean, I've seen this on numerous blocks. As I sit in the car, I can see 3 different blocks and they're all the same. There is nobody vacating a spot for even 5 minutes.
Something I need to fix. Absolutely. That's a very clear answer. I need to fix that.
Okay. I mean, I have videos and pictures I can send if you care.
Nope, I don't dispute it. I take your word on that.
Lisa Orman was the next one, and then we go to the next round. And we're running, it's 7:19, so I don't know how many more we can take.
Just Rich Robbins will be the last speaker on this.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Captain, thank you so much for being here tonight. You're a breath of fresh air for Safe Streets advocates. I'm curious if you're working on educating your colleagues within NYPD on double parking and abusing placards and parking on sidewalks. I really think that people lose faith in the police when they act above the law, and it would go a long way if they were actually part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
Well, I'm glad you voiced that point, because I made it a point to read all the comments. It looks like there might now be up to about 38 comments, and I know some people didn't get to speak, and I wanted to make sure that you guys are confident that I will at least read all the comments here. So I believe number one was your point, maybe it was you who typed it, about officers improperly parking, be it their personal vehicles or their patrol vehicles. And quite frankly, more needs to be done. You'll hear it from me. While placard enforcement is taken against this, more needs to be done. I see photos all the time. There are obviously websites and Twitter pages dedicated just to improper parking with placards. And it's a bit more than just an education. It's a constant follow-up. And the good news is, I believe, that it's fixable. It's a problem that's fixable. We can fix this problem. And I definitely know the leadership of the NYPD is fully on board, as is the chief of transportation, a newly appointed chief, who is absolutely focused on building this community trust by us leading by example. If me, and I'll always use myself as an example, if I'm going to park my car in a bike lane so I can go get a cup of coffee. That is setting the poor, a very poor example. It's endangering a cyclist, and clearly I need to correct it or be held accountable. Now, okay, we all know that if there's an emergency in a building, you know, God forbid a robbery or an assault, I need to get into that building and I can put the car there, but that's not what we're talking about. That's not what you're talking about. You and I are both talking about convenience, someone parking improperly on a hydrant, a sidewalk, because they have a placard and they do it out of convenience. And I can definitely say this bureau, the Transportation Bureau, takes the lead on that and has to lead by example. So in a word, I hear you, you're right, and more needs to be done. And it starts right here with me. And it is getting done, but it needs to expedite.
Thank you, Captain.
Mark, you're calling the remaining.
Yeah, Ira Gershenhorn was next. Let me get to Ira.
And Rich wanted to speak.
And yes, and I see Robert Espalier has his hand up too. So maybe those three speakers, and then we'll call it a day. Because we've got to, and everybody please move along because it's already 7:22 and we haven't gotten to the West End Avenue.
This was a good conversation.
No, you've been terrific,
Okay.
sir. Thank you
Questions?
for joining us.
Thank you,
Go ahead, Ira.
thank you, Captain. Okay, first question. I think they're all yes and no's. Does the police department consider itself overwhelmed by traffic safety issues? And
Overwhelmed, no, because we know that the burden is heavy and we must do more. And we have some great partners. DOT with their speed cams, the Taxi and Limousine Commission, and many other partner agencies, the sheriff. So no, we're not overwhelmed, but more needs to be done.
And I have a question about whether you talked about taking license plates, and a gentleman before me talked about parked cars not moving for street sweepers, and he was offering videos, and I would just think the street sweepers should have a camera with them and take video of as they're going, a GoPro just stuck on, constantly taking videos.
I know the buses have that, the MTA buses have that. I'm not sure if sanitation looked into that.
It's very low tech, very low tech.
Sure.
And on an open street, a bicycle can't go the wrong way, like on East on West 103rd.
Ooh,
I could get a ticket for going east on 103rd.
On an open, boy, I mean, are you talking, was there a summons issued? It almost sounds like maybe you're going to.
No, I've never seen a policeman there, but
would probably issue to a bicyclist on an open street for going the wrong way. Because it's kind of where it's more of a park, more of an open space than a street, which is subject to the vehicle and traffic laws. So I would kind of say that is something that we won't really have too much of.
Thank you, Captain. That's it.
Okay, thank you. So Robert and then Rich Robbins, and then we're going to move our agenda, right?
Yes.
Okay, Captain, I'll be very quick.
Right.
And my question is a two-part question. I'm a block away from Amsterdam and 96th Street.
Okay.
And on a regular basis, when the barriers go up, I see cars stop at the barriers, angrily get out, move the barrier, and go in. Apparently they live in or dropping something off for people off at 97th Street.
Okay.
So what is that's the part one. What's that about? And are they within their rights? They don't come out again and put the barrier back up. You know, they're pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
And the part two is that on that particular open street, between 96 and 97, you have Holy Name Church. Across the street, you have Key Food, and then you have CVS. So it's like dead air in broadcasting. So why is their barrier not beginning at 97th Street, where you have the Asian restaurant, you have Malikon, you have this and that and the other thing, and that they're very busy dining venues? So that's my two-part question.
So
the access to 97th Street for people who live there, and why the barrier at 96 and not 97th Street?
The second part of that question is kind of so localized, and I won't, I kind of look things from a citywide level, all the boroughs, and I'm obviously familiar with 96th Street, familiar with Amsterdam. But as far as some of the restaurants and the Key Food you mentioned, I might not be able to answer that. But more importantly, the way the program is supposed to.
There are no restaurants there. There's no outdoor seating there.
Yeah, I just don't have the knowledge to really answer part two of that question. But part one, I feel, might be the most important one. So a motorist can access local access to pick something off, drop something off on that block, So let's say there's a barrier and they need to drop a person off, make a delivery, or pick something up on that block. They can move the barrier temporarily and go in. And then I guess that's $1 million question. In a perfect world, they would then get out of their car again and then move the barrier back to the way they found it, or a community member. And I understand they're not employees of this program, which is obviously something they're working out. I see some of the comments written here. A community member or a bid member or whoever or a resident would move the barrier back, which is
that would be a great, what you're suggesting, I think would be a great solution, a community volunteer, and you give them a nice white shirt, and a cap.
I've seen them just with like a vest on, that's it.
Monitors to raise and lower the barrier.
Fair. Yeah, I think that's the perfect world.
Thanks. Let's move ourselves along here. I'm sorry to be the guy to do that. So Howard, you called on Rich, and then I know there are other hands in the queue, but we're going to have to move our agenda because everybody wants us to get to West End Avenue.
Yes, Rich.
Great, thank you very much. And I want to mention, we have great partnerships with both of our local precincts, the 20th and 24th precincts. Nonetheless, I asked a question at the listening tour that the NYPD did of Commissioner Shea that included some concerns that I have about just the ability of the local precincts. Number one, as Captain Werby mentioned, I expressed concern that there aren't many officers in the local precincts who have radar training. They're also very small areas, and it's great for community policing. It's not necessarily, in my mind at least, the best for traffic enforcement, because within 2 minutes, someone can drive out of one precinct and into another. And also, the precincts aren't just as equipped with data access and analysis as citywide is. And through that, I was put in touch with Captain Morabi, had a great conversation, and invited him to join this meeting. I really appreciate your joining us. Definitely want to keep the dialogue open to see how we can play a role and coordinate our efforts, both with analysis and prioritization and with DOT for street design. Really love the data-driven approach that you're doing with the Transportation Bureau, something that I've really tried to bring to our community board. And I think the more that we can work together and really use data as a way of figuring out how we should prioritize what we're doing and how we can help you and vice versa, that would be great. One example I mentioned when we spoke was, we've had some issues, and Andrew Alpert has been for years trying to get DOT to put up signs as cars drive into our neighborhood. Just a lot of them are coming from, especially out of the neighborhood, but even out of state, and they might not know about the no right turn on red. They might not know about the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. And I think the more that we can coordinate with you and work together to try to get DOT to institute our top priorities, the more effective we both can be. I would also love to do pilot projects with you. We'd love to be guinea pigs. We'd love to work not only with the precincts, but with NYPD transportation and with DOT to make our streets safer. And as you can tell, we have a very engaged community, which can be a really good thing. And for that reason, if we can do pilot projects, having said that, as engaged as our community is, you are especially popular. So do hope that you come back. Had a really good conversation with you, and just want to thank you once again for joining us.
Great, guys. I know you have a big agenda. I'm going to obviously kind of log off, and I'm going to go through, looks like another 35 messages came through. This way I can take in what you guys wrote. And I'll leave you at one thought that, we deal with a matter of life and death. These lives that are lost in traffic deaths are just as important to us as someone who is a homicide victim or murder victim. When we do an investigation for a traffic death, it is a homicide level violation. This is a matter of life and death, and I want everybody to know that all your concerns are important, be it something as, I don't want to say it's simple as someone not moving their car for a street sweeper, or to a speeding vehicle that could unfortunately rip a family apart by injuring a child, or God forbid, even worse, to a child, which I won't even mention. So we hear you, we hear this city, and a lot more work needs to be done, and we are in this for the long run. I don't care what the budget is, I will be here.
Thank you so much, Captain.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Captain.
Pleasure having you. Thank you.
I apologize to the folks who had raised their hands to speak, but we got to move our agenda. So I'm going to lower those hands. Sanjeev Mehta is somebody who has new business for you, Howard and Andrew. So when we get to that, we will, when you get to that part of the agenda, we'll call on him then. But I'm lowering the hands now.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Go ahead.
Item number 2 on our agenda is expansion of the city's open storefronts program to allow retailers to use street space. You've all heard the announcement from the mayor's office, I am sure. This is in response to pockets of COVID throughout the city and the ability to help store owners maintain their business and not have just vast areas of empty storefronts. So they can put some of their goods out on the sidewalks and perhaps even do some transactions out on the sidewalk, and thus avoid having people in a small confined area within their stores. I don't know if BCI committee has sounded off on this, but this is probably an item that we would normally do jointly with them. But this will involve the taking of some more sidewalk space. I don't know how many of our merchants will participate in this. But it is the law of the city right now, and we're open for discussion on this proposal.
Mark, do you know if the BCI has weighed in on this?
Our resolution back in May, well, I guess it was adopted in the June full board meeting, called for the creative use of outdoor spaces for both restaurants and for other small local retail businesses. So we are already on record as supporting this, and given the number of people who are asking questions about West End Avenue, I don't know what more you need to do other than announce the program, and unless there's comment or concern that the community has about this.
I agree. I think we've weighed in on this. The program that they've rolled out for retail is more limited than the program for restaurants. And I don't see a need for a resolution on this. I just think everyone needs to be aware of this. I think everyone is already aware of what a desperate situation much of the retail is in. And I hope this program gets expanded in the way we've called for it to be expanded, and it brings some life to the retail space. That's
Howard, the only issue might be in the case of restaurants. Some restaurants have actually, with the approval of their neighbors, taken space in front of those retail stores who weren't restaurants, and in a few cases, perhaps somebody will want to reclaim that to do their outdoor. But I don't think it's a big issue.
I don't think it's going to be a big issue. I don't think that many retail establishments are going to want this space anyway. But
Yes.
Again, we're on record as being in favor of it. Hopefully, the city will do what it can. Since this is not really a controversial issue, or we're not adopting a resolution, we have 2 hands raised. Why don't we try to address this quickly and move on to the issue that is going to attract?
I also have 2 hands in the community. So
okay, Barbara, and then Ken, and then we'll get to the community. Barbara?
Right. Howard, I think you already actually answered this, but I'm most familiar with the stores in the Columbus Avenue bit, as you know, and those merchants have merchandise which is so pricey that they're not going to bring it outside. They're trying to make their stores as open and as accessible as possible, so that, and only allow 1 or 2 people in at a time. And I think you're going to see that pretty much throughout this district.
And that's why I don't see this as a big issue. Ken?
Hey.
Yeah, it just seems a little unfair. Maybe there's an equity issue here that restaurants are allowed to use curbside space in addition to the sidewalk, and our struggling businesses are not.
Well, Ken, the reason is that you spend more time, most folks do, in a restaurant than you do in another kind of business, and that could be the reason for the additional space.
But if a business could, if they could thrive by being able to use curbside space, which they might, then I think we should do it.
Yep.
Well,
They can.
I'm hopeful we'll have a vaccine fairly soon.
And again, we've called on the city to do it, so our voice has been heard. Two quick, actually, we have only one hand.
No, you have two. The first one is, I'm sorry, I'm promoting them in advance so you can be ready to rock and roll.
Okay, then you call them.
Okay, so Ankur Dalal, followed by Sandra Smith.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Sure can,
Yes.
go ahead.
All right, thank you. Short comment. I just wanted to thank the community board for all its work on the program to have restaurants and stores have have curbside and street uses. It has completely transformed the neighborhood and gotten us through a very dark time. The Upper West Side has never felt more alive to me. I've been a member of this community for years, and I am so excited to see our streets change from being private storage for public storage for people's private property, their cars, into something that actually can benefit the entire community. I know there's a lot of interest that you guys have to balance, but I think you're doing a wonderful job. It really makes it feel like a brand new city, and it's so magical to see so many people out and actually enjoying the streets. So I really want to commend you, and I hope that even as COVID goes away, we continue to think about how best to use our public spaces for the entire public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Was there one more?
Yes, Sandra Smith.
Hi there. Thank you for having me. Do you hear me?
Sure do. A little louder, Sandra?
A little louder, please.
A little louder? Okay. Do you hear me now?
Much better.
Better.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for taking my question. I think it's a great idea to open this up to more businesses on the storefront. But my question is more then what happens to the transportation? All these stores are very heavily, a lot of traffic. The streets like Amsterdam is already, honestly, I live on Amsterdam, and the past 6 months, it's crazy between the trucks and the bicycles and the school buses that are double parked, UPS, FedEx. I mean, if you're going to start opening up more space for the stores and the restaurants, which is great, then you're going to have to balance it out and definitely reopen West End Avenue. And I know that you guys are going to go back to West End Avenue, and I appreciate the fact that when COVID happened, it was necessary, but the parks are open, the playgrounds are open, and there's not one commercial establishment on West End Avenue. So to me, it's more of how are you going to balance that? If you're going to open this all up, then you need the pedestrians to feel safe to walk and shop and eat. Thank you.
That's a perfect segue to our next agenda item, which in fact is West End Avenue. I will concede I am not an expert on this subject. Is there someone from the NYPD who can tell us exactly what the plans are with regard to West End Avenue?
McDonald,
Colleen is on as well.
Great.
Well, Colleen.
Hey, so it's Colleen from DOT. So with West End Open Street, our partner is the local precinct. And we had reached out to them, and they had committed to putting out the barricades and removing the barricades. But I believe there might have been some issue with having to do this on a daily basis. I'm not sure, but maybe NYPD can elaborate more on this if they're there.
Detective McDonald, can you hear us? I know Detective McDonald is with us, but it took us a while to get to him, so maybe he's doing other duties.
Okay, in advance of this meeting, I tried to...
Here he is.
Okay.
Yeah, hi. In reference to what Ms. Chadigan said, we never had community partners for West End Avenue. That was what our understanding was. We had barriers delivered there, but we don't have community partners who set up anything. We take our resources to open it up, close it at night, and then maintain the barriers as best we can by ordering more from the barrier shop. But it wasn't ours to handle originally, the way it was explained to me.
Colleen, you want to respond to that or not necessary?
So, I mean, whenever, with the open street, in order for us to do this, we have to have a partner. So it's possible maybe Detective McDonald is not aware of our conversation. I would have to find out. I would have to go back and find out from my colleagues who we spoke with.
Actually, do you guys mind if I jump in here?
Not at all.
Go ahead.
I think I can explain the discrepancy. And thanks for bringing this up. And I really want to thank both the 24th precinct for putting up and taking care of the barricades when possible. And I want to thank the people who live along West End Avenue who have written to me about their experience with West End Avenue. This was one that actually fell through the cracks between the 24th Precinct, DOT, and City Hall. My office could be to blame completely, because I was asked what streets I'd like to see be used as open streets. And this again was in April, when they just started the Open Streets program. And I recommended West End Ave. I was given parameters, which was basically nothing with a bus route on it. And so I recommended West End Avenue between 87th and 95th. Or 96. And so they went ahead and did it without there being appointed anyone to oversee that particular stretch. And it fell on the PD to do that, which I think is really unfair. When you look at the one that Peter Arnston runs on Amsterdam Avenue in front of his bid, it's very successful. And it's because it's very successful because his bid is paying attention to it all the time. So on this one, we're in a very different situation. I was really glad to have it during the summer months and into the fall, but the burden has rested on the NYPD, and we've asked the people who love the West End Avenue Open Street program if they would take responsibility for the barricade, because that's really at the heart of the issue. And so far, we've not heard back about that, which is too bad. You know, if there's a group that takes responsibility, then it would work. I see a lot is going on in the chat.
Yeah,
and
I just noticed that too. If I could
I want to
interrupt for a second.
respond, so I'll
I'm
stop
sorry.
there.
I just want to, we didn't have ground rules at the beginning of this meeting, but our general ground rules are that we are constructive and productive on our discussions.
Wow, is there a reason yeah.
And we're also.
I don't quite understand some of these comments.
This is getting bad.
Let's not go down that rabbit hole, and let's all agree that we need to be productive and positive, and also to stay on the topic of this meeting, which is West End Avenue, which a lot of people have been asking for to be heard about. So please, let's not go down another path. Let's have a productive discussion about West End Avenue. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be very clear. This has been a great success, and people loved it, especially during the summer. That's no admission. It's just how things work. So if there's a group who's willing to take responsibility for it, that'd be great. I'm in touch again, just trying to look at the chat and not look at the chat at the same time. About a half a dozen people, or maybe 10, have emailed me saying, please keep it open and not with cars, with no solution. with no solution to addressing really the problem of minding, cars going through the barricades. So I walk through that area, as do a couple of my staffers on a regular basis. So we have a good handle on what we're seeing there. And there are real safety concerns, especially around 97th and Riverside Drive.
Helen, do you know what the plans are for West End Avenue?
What do you mean?
What the status of that open street is going forward?
I mean, they're asking me to find somebody to take responsibility for it. And if I can't find someone to take responsibility for it, it's not, the question is answered. My office never has done it, nor have we ever been asked to. Detective McDonald and the 2-4 have done yeoman's work, doing the best they can when it's really not their responsibility. So, again, unless the community who lives there wants to step up and take real responsibility, I don't see another option, because I think at this juncture, and certainly for winter, we want to go with safety first. And I'm just getting overwhelmed with emails saying that they're seeing cars whip through West End Avenue, not realizing there's a barricade, hitting a barricade, whatever it is. And I know there are people who just love it, because I'm getting some of those emails as well.
Is there a time frame involved?
I'm being asked right now. This conversation has been going for the last 2 weeks. And I've been trying to get the community to step up, if even just on weekends. But, everyone's at a loss because no one is taking responsibility for it. And if that's the case, ultimately the city is responsible and they have to do the responsible thing.
Yeah, it's Colleen. And in all fair honesty, we need to have a partner. And if we don't have a partner, then the street will have to go back to the way it was. And I know we're in discussion about this internally and with City Hall as well.
Colleen, do you have a time frame?
I would, I would probably have something for you by Friday. Let me get back to you by Friday, because I know tomorrow we're off. So let's see by Friday.
If I could just add, one of the community folks brought up the issue of congestion on Amsterdam earlier, and even prior to the closure of West End Avenue from 87th to 96th, Amsterdam Avenue, even prior to the seating of restaurants in the street, had come down to one moving lane at times due to double parked delivery vehicles, double parked other vehicles, and what have you. And I think closing of West End Avenue may have made sense when Riverside Park was closed, and it was the height of the summer and everybody wanted to be outside. But once school resumed at PS 75, and fewer people were using the open street, and traffic was starting to build on other northbound avenues, I think it started to make less and less sense. And I certainly understand the need for a community partner to move the barriers, but I'm thinking that as the cold weather is coming and folks are not going to want to, in fact, I hope the restaurants survive this winter with outdoor seating and all of the special heating and plastic that they've put up. I'm thinking that it probably makes sense to restore West End Avenue to its former self. That's just my opinion.
And just to be clear, the responsibility is not just for the barricades. I mean, there are some streets between Columbus and Central Park West that are closed down by schools. And there is school staff there all the time.
Absolutely.
Watching. So, and West 75th Street for a time was closed between Broadway and West End. The Block Association took responsibility, which meant they had people standing there. So, it's a real job.
Okay, we have a few comments from the committee, and we also have two people from the community who want to give, and I emphasize, short presentation. So why don't we hear from the four hands raised on the committee first?
Right, Howard?
Oh,
Can
yep.
I just check? I think
Absolutely.
Detective McDonald wanted to say something.
Detective?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Rosenthal. Yeah, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Well, we're trying to figure out West End Avenue. Can we just get a definite answer to closing it prior to 8 p.m. because it's pitch black by 4:30 now? I mean, if someone can get in contact with the precinct so we have it in writing, we'd like to try to shut it down maybe at 4 for safety. I mean, it's that's when the barriers sometimes get struck in the darkness.
Sure, it's Colleen, and I can look into that, definitely.
Yeah, because that would be a big help for us, just for everybody's safety.
That was a concern that came up with residents, that, you know, pedestrians are crossing, motorists are still traveling through the streets, and they're not seeing the pedestrians as they're crossing.
And one last thing, we're going to try to put a barrier on 86th Street on the northbound side, because that would let people decide before 87th whether to go east or west to avoid it. If they get to 87th Street or West End, they get into a choke, and they have to proceed westbound on 87th Street.
Yes, I was also wondering why there was no notice to motorists south of 87th Street well in advance that this is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, we wanted to put a couple up on 86th in the West End so they can decide hopefully a little better. Yeah, well, that comes, it's only for the open streets from 8-7 to 9-6.
No, I understand, but a motorist at 78th might want to know that.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, just for our end, at our precinct, we'd have to worry about that.
It's a big job. And also just to message to the community, look, I'm being asked, are there any other block associations or streets that want to take responsibility, because the Open Streets program has been so successful throughout the city, and they're loath to close them. But again, if it's not safe, it's it is what it is. But I put that out there to everyone. If other people, if there's a community group out there that wants to take responsibility for a particular block or area, please just let us know, let DOT know, and we can really move forward on that.
Thank you, Helen. Let me call on some of our committee members before calling on the public. William Ortiz, please.
Thank you, Andrew. So, my position on this West End Avenue street is pretty much the same as it was back in April and May, that my concern is on safety and for emergency vehicles to have quick access to homes. We're very lucky to be in New York City now, and a lot of us did not feel the same several months ago when it was the epicenter of the world of COVID crisis. And to echo Helen's point that it is crucial for us to have partners to control traffic. If we go back to our community board meetings, you can easily find on YouTube, you can hear us say that, yeah, we'll have partners. Yeah, it'll be easy. Yeah, we'll have volunteers. Fast forward to today, it isn't really the case. And if we can have partners, this can be something that's very successful. But it seems like it's very difficult to maintain at this point. And Helen has spoken to plenty of neighbors who love it, but it's very hard to find those who want to support it and be there and do the work and maintain it. It takes a lot of work to keep the community together. Look at the board, we're all different, we're all diverse, but we all still want to be here. And I think that's really beautiful and important. So I think this West End Avenue open streets should be retired at some point, or at least have a game plan on when it should be retired if COVID crisis continues to increase. Again, my point of concern is emergency vehicles, how it affects drivers. Maybe at one point we can get hospitals and drivers of ambulances to hear what they would like to see in the streets and how closures like this would affect them. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken, you're next.
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate that we have to have a community partner to maintain what is unquestionably a safer street. And I'm wondering, Helen, I think there'd be much less need for a community partner if we did three things. One, the barriers were larger. We basically have the minimum right now, wooden barrier on one side, which really doesn't send much of a signal to a driver. Also, much better signage from DOT that's larger and more prominent, more visible. And also, how about if we make it 24/7? Why do we need this, why not have the open street overnight? I realize there won't be that many people out there, but that's not really the point. The point is it's a safer street and a better functioning street.
Yeah, I like all those ideas. This is something that was put together because of COVID. And, we're in a time, I support everything you're saying, and that, but what's screaming at me in my head is the feedback I'm going to get when I reach out to City Hall about this. Have you seen the budget lately? We are not going to spend money on signage, bigger barriers, number one. And number two, the police really shouldn't be the partner on this one, because this is not part of their job definition. And it has been unfair to them this whole time. So trying to navigate all those things, and, to the people in the chat who are saying, oh, I'll volunteer, it's not one person saying, I'll be there. I mean, this is a very serious, it's a long avenue. There's a lot of stuff going on. And, for those who are interested in volunteering, I would urge you to reach out again to Peter Arnston from the Columbus Avenue bid, who even in the chat is saying that he's created his own signs and all the things he's tried to do to make it work. But again, he's there all the time,
That's the
watching
difference.
what's going on. And then there's someone in the chat, which is just making some silly comments, Annabelle Winifred, saying something about the streets are closed for security reasons to prevent convicted sex offenders from approaching students. I mean, that's just silliness. I don't even know how to respond to that. That's not even in the realm of.
I don't know that you should, Helen.
Yeah, let's.
We have a lot of folks waiting to speak.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Sarah, you're on.
Yeah, I'll just be quick, and Helen maybe just addressed it, but I was just going to mention that there's a lot of people in the chat saying, and not just that they'll volunteer, but I see that some of them are saying they have an organization. So I just was wondering if someone could address exactly, if they have an organization, who they should be in touch with, just so they can, it's great to see community members stepping up.
Yeah,
Thank you, Sarah.
And anyone can email me, helen@helenrosenthal.com, and we'll get that information on to DOT right away, and happy to have a serious conversation about it.
Thank you. Barbara?
My own observation, and I know people will dispute this, and I don't want to get into a debate over it, but I think this area was always really underutilized, even in the middle of summer. I rarely saw anybody using it during the time that I used it as a passageway to walk up and walk down. Now it's really totally underutilized. So I completely support Andrew and William. I am very concerned about the safety there. As I mentioned before, the cars are whizzing, zigzagging through those barriers, and somebody's going to be killed there. And winter is coming. There's really no reason to have this anymore. Without a community partner, I think we should really shut it down.
Thank you. Jay?
You have to
Jay,
unmute,
are
Jay.
you?
Okay,
There you go.
so I'm really astounded at what I'm hearing from people who are supporting maintaining this stretch of West End Avenue. I haven't heard a person talk about the effect it has on the residents of West End Avenue. Of course, everybody's concerned with safety. If closing down the streets and eliminating traffic was the primary concern throughout the city, we could just ban cars. And I know there are some people, including some on this committee, that would love it, but it's not practical. This street was closed, call it an open street, but it's really closed because ostensibly the pandemic. And the rationale was that people needed more space to maintain social distance from each other and to have additional space for recreation because at the time there were limits on park space. Nobody in our district lives more than 2 blocks from Central Park or Riverside Park. The sidewalks on West End Avenue are generally 16 feet wide. There is absolutely no pandemic COVID-19 reason to maintain the structure as it is now. West End Avenue is a major north-south thoroughfare. We need to have accessibility and the street be passable for police responding to emergencies, for ambulances, for fire trucks, for school buses, for garbage trucks, for utility vehicles, for delivery trucks, for contractors, and of course, for normal automobile use for the people that live on West End Avenue. But nobody is talking to people who live on West End Avenue. Helen said that people have contacted her office to say how much they like this. I contacted Helen's office to suggest that the time has come to close this, open it up to its normal operation. And what I received in return was a pro forma "thank you for your interest" email. That's not talking to people. Excuse me, Helen, let me finish.
Well, let's do it.
The fact of the matter is that, you know, we live in a busy city and the traffic on West End, just like the traffic on all the other thoroughfares, is going to exist and it's going to continue. And as far as the use of this by pedestrians, anybody who lives on West End or has walked on West End or has observed West End can fully appreciate the fact that the novelty of this open street wore off in about 2 weeks. And on any given day, and I've sent Mark some pictures, starting months ago, there is nothing but a trickle of pedestrians who could just as easily be walking on the sidewalk. And as far as what's this particular picture shows what happens to be going on now. And you can imagine what happens when cars have to access this little bit of space that's left now. Yes, it's a safety hazard. You have to be semi-crazy to walk in the middle of West End Avenue with what's going on now. I park a car in a garage on 89th Street. I'm fortunate to be able to do that. I never use it within the city limits. I use it to leave the city or to come back to the city. I've tried to be a good citizen with this street, and I pull on to West End and then right up 90th Street to Broadway into the mess of traffic and the backup of traffic that's become Broadway. Last week I pulled out, I turned the corner, and what did I see? I saw a school bus, I saw a truck, I saw a van, and I saw 2 cars waiting in the northbound lane on 90th Street and West End Avenue for the light to change. The light changed, and not one of those vehicles made a right turn onto 90th Street. They went around the barrier like a slalom course. And I said to myself, am I crazy? Why should I go up to 90th Street to Broadway? So I just followed along to 96th Street and got on the West Side Highway along with the 5 vehicles in front of me. I confess to that. And that's what's happening. Not to mention the cars.
Jay, we
really
Yeah, I'm going to
need to
speak my piece. I'm sorry. I'll take another minute.
Easy does it.
I live on that street. When we had a homeless person from the Lucerne who wanted to speak his piece, we gave him 15 minutes. Now, I live on West End Avenue, and like the other residents of West End Avenue, be they renters or co-op or condo owners, we did not sign up to live in a park or a playground. There are people now working at home who are disturbed, not so much now because now it's pretty much empty, but at the beginning, by kids making noise, by people standing around, yelling and shouting and so forth. This is a residential street. We're entitled to live on a residential street. There was never any reason to have an open street on West End Avenue. There is not a reason now, and it's time to go back to normality.
Thank you. Stephen?
Tough act to follow, Jay. But listen, I'll give a couple, sort of just agree with a couple people and give my opinions, Helen. Helen, I live on, if you remember, in the 80s, 86 in Riverside. I think that when the parks closed and these Open Streets initiative opened, I was happy with them. I can tell you that Lucas and my son went over there many times in the middle of the day because we were going to kill each other, and threw the ball around and sat down, and there was people sitting in the streets, and I remember somebody on 80th and 89th used to bring a little pool out and put his feet in, and I think it made a lot of sense then. And if we hit those times again, I would support it. But I think now that the parks are open, you just don't see really any pedestrians there. If Mark, you want to pull up, I sent Mark 2 pictures. It's 73 degrees out today, 2 o'clock. I just happened to walk over there just so that I would have some contact. Not a single person. This is what the street looks like. I mean, there's nobody sitting in the street. I never see anybody in the street. And again, if the park closed up again, then I would say, hey, let's do this. I was very happy you did that. I was happy that street opened, but I think things have changed, and I think that's what a lot of people feel about it. And I want to express a concern is, and you can see there's lots of construction going on too, up and down, that exacerbate the situation. So I do believe now nobody uses it from a pedestrian perspective. If you're a kid, you want to go to the park. If you're one of those senior citizens that are over on the West Riverside and in between, everyone goes to the benches over there, and they're lovely and they're being used. But I would challenge anyone to kind of go up and down during a day and kind of see people squatting out there in the middle of the day. And that's what I thought it was for. And if there's so that would be that's my personal feedback to you. Great timing. Thank you for doing it. Time is ready to. I didn't even know that these were issues as well. So I think the time would be, let's take it down. If for any reasons we close up the parks again, I'd be all for doing it, because I do think people need to get out. And I just want to express one concern. If for some reason that you don't, there is a reason that you do move forward, I ask that you get a community partner that's a local community person. I have concerns that people who have bigger issues have been advocating open streets for 10, 15, 20 years, and that's sort of their platform, are kind of coming into this meeting and coming into this area and are going to talk about why they should keep it up. I wouldn't want somebody living in Tribeca who's trying to sort of take control of this, or an association that does it. I think most of the locals think that this would be the common sense approach that I speak to, but I just want to be careful of people coming in and advocating that really aren't local people. And if you were to move forward, which I wouldn't want you to do, but if you did, make sure it's somebody. And I look at what Peter does. I've been up there. He's done a great job. I love it. You know, I mean, and I love all these things. I just think this is just a different one. It's not the same thing. It's not being used the same way.
Thank you, Steve. We're ready to take some community voices on this now.
Can I just interject? We have two people who wanted to make presentations. One is Tag Gross, and the other is Christina Whale. What do you want to just do those first, and then we'll have comments from the community?
This is
your Howard and Andrew. It's Rich. I don't have the ability to raise my hand, but I had put in chat that I do want to speak. So I don't know.
Absolutely. I didn't see another committee member.
Tag, and then Christina. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm happy going after them. I just want to make sure I get.
No, go.
No, go now, Rich.
Okay. Few thoughts, and okay. I mean, obviously there are differences of opinions. I personally love open streets. I'm lucky enough to live on one on West 103rd Street, and it's just wonderful to be able to walk with more space, to be able to have more space from people who may or may not be wearing masks, and in general. One example, my parents visited today from New Jersey. It was their first time in New York City since February, and the open street was great because they're at an age where they just can't be exposed to COVID. I know people are making an argument of it's a matter of parks versus streets. And for me, it's not, because it's a matter of being able to walk and get around versus being able to go to a park and do park things in a park. People need to be able to walk around the neighborhood safely. And a number of people have made an argument that because fewer people are using them, we should get rid of them. That argument doesn't completely hold water because people aren't using them because they're not safe. And you get a vicious cycle. If they're not enforced, if they're not safe, people aren't going to use them. But that's not necessarily an argument that they should be gotten rid of. Definitely cars ignore the barricades, the supposed 5 mile/hour speed limit, and the local traffic only rule. In my mind, the makeshift barrier doesn't give the impression that those are real limits and that there are consequences for doing what cars are doing, which is whizzing around the barriers and speeding down the streets. And I don't think we've seen any enforcement, so there aren't consequences. And so it's going down that vicious cycle. In my mind, it's not long-term sustainable for things to be so manual. We need long-term plans, both for open streets and outdoor dining. And assuming we keep the open streets, we need a more permanent solution. We need 5 mile/hour speed limits. We need speed bumps where they're possible. We need enforcement, and we need barriers that are permanent and don't require people to slide them in and out of the street. The idea of expecting drivers to move a barrier out of their way and then get out of their car and put it back ain't gonna happen. And I was impressed that Captain Morobi told people that they should move the barriers themselves. I actually did that when I was walking tonight with my parents, and there's that feeling of like, I'm moving a police barricade, or is this illegal for me to do this?
And your fingerprints are on it now.
They are. And there's a question of, how do we get something that's more long-term sustainable on any open streets that we keep in effect? Because what we have right now clearly is not working. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. Again, now that we're done with the committee, why don't we take comments from the community, and we'll start with the two community members who had short, and I emphasize short. This really can't go more than a few minutes. Tag Gross and then Christina Whale. Why don't we start with Tag? Mark, do you have the slides to share?
Yes, I just promoted Tag so he can be seen and heard, and I just promoted Christina. So we'll take Tag first, and I think I know where his slides are, so give me a second.
Yeah, I don't need them right away. Thanks so much, appreciate it, and good to see all of you again. I just want to quickly agree with especially what Jay and Andrew were talking about. If you're a West End Avenue resident, you understand that these open streets are not necessary. And beyond the safety issue that's happening where the streets are actually closed is the issue of safety and livability in the border areas where I live up in the upper 90s. So what we suffer with is safety issues that are due to traffic congestion caused by West End Avenue southbound being closed. And we end up having people running the zebra striping. We end up having aggressive driving. We also end up having excess emissions. We have horn honking that increases stress. All of the things that really the committee often talks about in the sort of anti-car verbiage You're imposing that on us. And part of it is this open streets. During the summer, it didn't matter because nobody was here. But as soon as Labor Day happened, we started getting these problems. And we're not anywhere near the level of traffic that we would expect. And we're at schools, I think they're saying schools are only 26%. And one of the big traffic issues for us is a school. So the West End needs to be open and needs to be opened immediately. It's a very wide, easy to walk on street. So I think Jay, and Steve and Andrew, I think they really articulated those points really well. I wanted to, with, Howard permission, I first came to you guys a couple years ago to talk about the problem happening in the upper 90s with all this traffic and congestion. I actually met with Helen and with Marisa and went through detailed presentations, which I showed you guys, photographs, videos, etc., showing just how bad it had gotten. And that's one of the reasons it's surprising that you guys agree, Helen agreed to, and you guys, acquiesce or give you the stamp of approval to put this thing starting at 96th Street. And I was hopeful that there's someone from DOT here, that there may be someone from the 2-4 here that can just, I'll go really quick through this and show you kind of what the problems are. Whenever you have people trying to reach the highway or trying to avoid traffic on the highway or avoid traffic on Broadway, it causes massive congestion. So right now, for example, if you look at actually it's listed as 97th on here, but it's 96th Street and Broadway. There are people heading southbound or trying to make a right-hand turn. Yeah, I have that one circle in the wrong place, Mark. So people are trying to get onto the highway from Broadway at certain times of the day. All day long now on that southwest corner in a no standing zone are a huge fruit truck and a huge cooking truck of some kind. They in a no standing zone. Those should be being ticketed and towed and moved out of there so that there's another lane of traffic available for the right-hand turn. Because as you guys know, we also have on 96th Street, we have the construction project going on. So the construction project now is actually encroaching on, not only taking the one lane they have, but encroaching on another lane. So there's two areas right there which are causing major traffic slowdowns. Then when you end up having any kind of southbound traffic, well, the result of all this traffic southbound, it will divert up at the top of West End and come down West End to try to avoid the Broadway traffic because there's only one lane getting through on 96th Street effectively. Then if you have southbound traffic on the highway, you have an exit at 95th Street. And now with the exacerbation with open streets, people see that 95th Street eastbound is blocked. Riverside Drive southbound is blocked. And what they'll do is they will zip up Riverside Drive up to 97th Street, up the access hill at a high rate of speed, 98th Street, come across 98th Street, and then be in gridlock and start blowing their horns, running into, they're literally with people on the zebra striping. And you have all the people coming from 97th Street, including buses, now trying to make the turn onto West End. And you have 2 points at 98th and West End and 97th and West End that are completely gridlocked. So this gets exacerbated because traffic can't pass through 96th Street southbound anymore. Then you have the issue that's been ongoing for so long, which is the issue of right-hand turns at 96th Street. Even now, with school not really in session and crossing guards there sort of intermittently, it's very bad. And again, backs up traffic. And this is happening a couple of times a day. It can happen on the weekends. And all we're doing is we're encouraging aggressive driving. We're encouraging emissions to be let out, and we're disturbing everyone's quality of life here in a really stressful way on the Upper West Side. And there's some very easy solutions to all this. One is open up West End Avenue already. We don't need it closed anymore. It was great when there was no one in the city and the parks were closed. There should be like a no left turn onto Riverside off of the exit from the highway. At 95th Street. People shouldn't be allowed to get off the highway there and make a left to try to do that zip up and around. We also, one of the really important things is we have to figure out a way to put a right-hand turn arrow onto that southbound at 96th Street. West End and 96, there has to be a green arrow. And there's no reason, now there's a left-hand turn arrow. There's no reason why the right turn and the left turn arrows cannot go at the same time if there are pylons put in the middle. It's basic driving. You make a right-hand turn into a right-hand lane, a left-hand turn into a left-hand lane. And these are some very concrete things: the enforcement of the no standing, enforcement of these construction lanes, the opening of West End, and then looking at signage to prevent some of these turns, and also to really look at doing this arrow. But in the meantime, please, initially, you can open West End and alleviate real safety issues for us that are up above this barricade at 96th Street. And that's it.
Thank you, Tag. Now we'll hear from Christina, who also has a presentation, and then we'll hear from community members who don't have their own presentations. Christina? You have
Hi.
to, oh, hi.
Hi, my name is Christina Weil, and I'm joined tonight with my colleague and neighbor, Jessica Spiegel, who's been working with me. I just want to, we all like data, and I'd like to share, what some of the community are saying. Jessica and I joined together just 2.5 weeks ago to, we can just skip, I think, Mark, to maybe some of the slides that have the data on them. So if you go down a little further.
Tell me which slide.
Keep going. 10. We can start with 10, I think. So Jessica and I, as I said, started to put up flyers on the barricades on West End Avenue. We walked up and down, the street, West End Avenue. I think we've heard a lot tonight that the current instance of West End Avenue open streets is not working. But I think that you can see in the data that we've collected, and right now I'm showing you data from a week ago. We had 275 respondents. We have well over 150 more responses since I cut this data. You have a very vocal minority who, like a quarter of people who do not like this, and they do not like it a lot based on a Net Promoter Score. But you have over half of the respondents who are 9s and 10s who do like this in some way. And I want to, keep going down here just to show you some of the concerns that people have had. People like the ability to have more space, to see reduced traffic on West End Avenue, to have the opportunity to chat with neighbors in a safe way. And a lot of people like that the street is quieter. If we go to the next slide, you can see some frustrations that people have had. These are things that people have brought up already, that people are ignoring, drivers are ignoring the barricades, that people do not feel safe, that the signage is not clear. We all can agree that the signage that is on these barricades right now, if the barricades are even standing, is not good enough. And then finally, if you go to the last slide, people are curious about what else could be happening on these streets. And, with all due respect to the drivers, this, if it is done well, I think could be a really wonderful opportunity for safety, for safe socialization, for people to have community. And I'm also going to add, because I know this is brought up by many people who are on the committee, these responses are people who live on West End Avenue. These are people who live in these buildings. I have their addresses. They're on cross streets. They're on Riverside. So it is unfair to lump in and say that all residents of West End Avenue do not like this program, because that is not true. And now if we can go down a little bit further, Jessica and I are proposing with community support, and right now we have over 150 people who've signed up to support the idea of continuing open streets in some way, not necessarily keeping it open on, you can go to maybe slide 15. We are proposing that perhaps the West End open streets be made weekend only in the winter. We agree that they're not safe right now. It is not safe with the commuters who are not paying attention to the barricades. And we said perhaps you could, in a modified scope, have it only open on the weekends. This would reduce NYPD. This would their manpower, setting the barricades up. We could reduce the length to address some of the concerns about people being able to get onto the highway in that 95th to 96th Street stretch. And if we could go to the next slide, you know, there are just some basic things that we think could help improve the situation. You could have double barricades on both sides, because right now cars are using it as a slalom course. And on the weekend, there is, you know, just less traffic. We could also, as people have said, have better signage that just 5 miles an hour is, I think, the most important thing here. And to really help educate people that, yes, if you live on the street, you can drive through at 5 miles an hour and you can drop off a person. You can pick up a person. It's not that the street is closed, it's just closed to through traffic. And Jessica and I have been talking to other open streets coalitions that are down on the Lower East Side, that are in North Brooklyn, some of the issues that they're facing. We really do hope that the community board will seriously consider this proposal to modify it. We agree it should be closed during the week. And we are happy to share the data that we've collected with the so you can see with your own eyes what your community is asking for. Again, it's a vocal minority who are car drivers and people who are frustrated with the rules. They have not been clearly articulated. So I think that's what I have to say. I don't know if Jessica can somehow become a presenter and ask or add anything she has to say.
Can I just ask Christina, do you live here on the Upper West Side in this area too?
I do. I live on 93rd and West End, and I have to say, the sense of community that we have built as a result of this open street and has been building since the spring. I mean, like so many people, we went out on Saturday to celebrate, and 93rd and West End was an epicenter of people out, you know, cheering and clapping on Saturday. And I felt really fortunate to be part of a neighborhood. And I think that the open street does help increase that sense of neighborhood.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Jessica. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, hi. So yeah, I just, you know, Christina did a great job. You know, I think, and, you know, honestly, like I live on 95th and West End. So, you know, I think especially, you know, we see the rise in COVID cases. So I understand, you know, that people are saying, oh, it's great in the summertime, but, you know, I think wintertime, your apartment starts to feel small again. So I think, you know, weekends would be great for us to be able to just, you know, walk around. And, you know, I know some of the other members had said that. And I think that a lot of the comments that we even saw in the survey and that I've heard tonight are talking about, well, I don't see people using it. And it's a huge question of chicken and egg. People don't use it. I don't go out there like I used to because people honk at me. People are trying to run me off the road, quite frankly. So you can't use it right now. And that's what we're trying to do. And, you know, we just started this process. So, you know, the idea that there's a community partnership, we just started this. So that's why we want to work with NYPD on this. We want to work with all the DOT on this and everything. So I think that we're here for this. We're trying to build that community because, you know, when Christina and I met, it was just two of us. And, you know, so I think that's why we wanted to come here tonight and show that, you know, even in just the short time we've been reaching out with surveys posted on the barricades, like we've already seen like a huge outpouring of people who wanted to do that. And, you know, we had never heard that. We wanted that people needed to be part of this. You know, this just came to us and it was great. And so I think it's great that, you know, I hope that you guys will consider this. Thank you.
Thank you. There are a couple of other people in the community who'd like to speak. Anthony Brown, you have to unmute yourself. Anthony? Well, if Anthony is not there.
He should be there in a second. Give him a second. Anthony, unmute yourself.
There you are.
You almost did it. Do it again.
Almost.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Andrea Katz and Anthony Brown. We're married. We live at 685 West End Avenue. And we wanted to say thank you very much for allowing us to hear this discussion tonight and to give Christina and Jessica a huge amount of support. We believe in the data here, and the data talks a different story to the emotion here. So there is a subjective versus objective content, and we'd love to have the objective content, meaning the data help drive a solution here, whatever that right solution is, and we're not experts. But if Open Streets isn't going to continue, we'd like to ask that the actual traffic flow on West End Avenue be considered, because for 30 years, we've seen traffic on West End become a fair nightmare, especially like at night when trucks roll down West End Avenue and buses roll down West End Avenue. So in the event that Open Streets does continue, great, and there will be some solution, and I trust Jessica and members of the committee and Christina to move that forward and with our support. But in the event it doesn't, could we please then table what actually happens with West End traffic? Because Broadway is often empty and West End Avenue crawling with commercial traffic at all hours.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, criticisms? Mark.
Thanks. I did want to weigh in on this just a little bit. And I have just a couple of points that I'll try to do the thing where I add without repeating what anybody else said. One of the concerns that I have with respect to the open street, and I think that we talked about this last spring, was anything that adds to the workload of the NYPD, especially at this moment, is not something that I think is sustainable. And so I think that we need to be very careful about relying on the NYPD to do the work that I understand the partner was supposed to do. I'm also concerned about construction, especially in the 90s on Broadway. There's a lot of different active construction sites there. And sometimes they require closing off travel lanes to traffic so that cranes can operate or things like that. In those circumstances, West End Avenue is needed as an alternative, especially for southbound travel. So construction overflow is kind of an issue that we haven't talked about here, but is unfortunately a necessity. And the last thing I'll say is that in the rush hours in the morning and the evening, there, and maybe Tag referred to this, so I'll be brief on this. But rush hour traffic on West End Avenue, either going to or coming from the highway, results in a lot of. I was up there this morning just to take the pulse of it, and it backs up from 96 to 100th almost every morning, and it also backs up going south in the evening, and that results in horn honking and congestion and so forth that I find problematic for neighbors. So anyway, for those reasons, I'm very concerned about the weekday use of the avenue. I hadn't really considered about the weekend. Those are my thoughts, and I just wanted to share them.
Thank you, Mark. The only thing I'll leave everyone with is Councilwoman Rosenthal has said if anyone is willing and able to volunteer to man these barricades, to definitely contact her office. And with that,
Colleen wrote that in the chat too. So
great.
Maybe CC both people.
Great.
Right. Can
Helen?
we just agree though on this call as a message to Colleen, although she may have to run it by City Hall, you know, the notion of what Detective McDonald recommended about closing it at 4. And
I got that. Yep.
Yeah. And then the other thing I heard was that the groups who possibly could organize agree that it should not be open during weekdays. Do you think, is this the lowest hanging fruit we can start with? Would everyone feel comfortable with that? And no, I'm not a member of the community board. Mark, you should be asking that question, but
I'm sorry.
I
Well, I'm
have
sorry. What
Colleen
did I
here
miss?
on the phone.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why that should not be considered. I mean, I think it's a great idea to even consider, doing this on the weekends, if that's the case. I mean, just as a compromise.
Yeah, but can we agree the lowest hanging fruit is, let's definitely, can you make this happen? Like, or do I need to reach out to the mayor's office?
Let me discuss it with Borough Commissioner Pinkar. I'll send him an email after this meeting. And we'll have an internal discussion and we'll get back to you in the community board.
Okay, that'd be great because
try to get back to you by Friday with the response.
It just
So exactly what is being proposed right now?
I'm just hearing everyone. This isn't a final at all, but hearing everyone, there seems to be universal agreement to open up West End Avenue to cars during the weekday, not have the barricades up.
What was the 4 p.m. proposal?
To close it at 4 p.m. to open the street at 4 p.m. because it's so dark.
I see.
We're not seeing pedestrians.
Right. Those seem like the two things that everyone agrees with. And then we'll, please, of course, if there's some sort of organized program for the weekend, I'm happy to look into that. Okay. Thanks, Colleen.
You're welcome, council member.
And thank you, Howard and Andrew and Mark and everyone.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Helen.
Very helpful.
Okay. The next, unless there's anything more on that, the next thing is follow up on outstanding business. Does anyone have any?
Let me add something, Howard.
Okay.
Are we
at our last meeting, we had a lot of folks expressing their concern over helicopter noise and what was causing it, if there was any enforcement. I reached out to EDC, who let me know that they are not in charge of mediating this, but they did say they reached an agreement with tour operators where there would be far fewer of them. I am going to reach out to Stop the Chop and anyone else who can get me the name of the current tour operators they see with binoculars, telescopes, or whatever, and see if that list concurs with what EDC thinks is operating. Apparently, yes.
Andrew, if I could just add, I did do a call unrelated with the Stop the Chop people. I don't know. I think Andy Rosenthal was on the call earlier. I don't know if he's still on and wants to add anything, but I specifically, in my non-CB capacity, had a conversation with the mayor of Jersey City because a lot of these helicopters are coming from New Jersey.
But not Jersey City. They're coming from Linden, I think.
Well, they're coming also from Jersey City, and it was made very clear to me that it's, federal issue. Talk to the FAA, talk to Congressman Nadler. So
Yes,
anything we
which we
can do
did.
on that front too, I just wanted to relay it.
What did Mayor Fulop say?
He said he's happy to help, but he thinks that it's a federal issue and we should, he's sort of, so.
Well, that's good. We've got to stay on this because it's rampant. It's worse than the motorcycle rampages that you heard described earlier, and it's potentially dangerous, and we have to, as they are, and we have to get a handle on this.
Absolutely.
I can also give you some updates on some MTA things. Apparently, the antimicrobials and the ultraviolet light that has been tested out on the subways has not proven as effective as was hoped, but the new air filtering, which uses electrostatically charged particles to clean the air, is becoming a wonder. It not only cures or takes COVID out of the air, it even takes the common cold germ out of the air. It is being currently tested on Metro North and the Long Island Railroad, and if successful, and all indications are that it is, it will be put on the subways and buses. And I'm guessing that even stores, restaurants, and theaters schools will want to put this in their ventilating system because it is so effective at killing these germs. So stay tuned on that one. Obviously, on the issue of funding the MTA, we are all waiting with bated breath to see when the transition will take place, if the president-elect can do some sort of interim funding. In the meantime, the MTA is investigating borrowing more from the municipal credit facility, which lends to cities, but is allowing transit systems to also borrow money at a pretty low rate, not low enough. Some members of Congress are trying to get it lowered even further so that when we have to pay this back, it isn't even more onerous, requiring an even higher fare hike. The MTA is likely going to vote on its budget at its December meeting. I am told, I'm getting a briefing next Monday, that there will be 2 presentations, one with federal aid and one without. And the one without is just horrific. 40% service cut on subways and buses, 50% on commuter rail, 8,700 layoffs, indefinite postponement of the MTA's capital program. Nothing gets cheaper the longer you wait. And it's just a horrible scenario. So we're all very hopeful that there'll be some important and beneficial changes coming out of Washington.
Andrew?
Yes.
Just wanted to add that if we do indeed have a change of leadership in Washington, that things are looking much better for congestion pricing, I would assume.
Oh, yes. Yes. The Department of Transportation has over 10 months now not given the MTA an answer on what kind of environmental impact statement or environmental assessment they need to proceed with that. It is abundantly clear that with a new president, we will get an answer very quickly, and that congestion pricing and all the money it contributes to the MTA's capital program may proceed, not to mention taking much needed traffic off our streets.
How quickly could congestion pricing be up and running, do you think?
If we got an answer in January, well, he only takes office January 20th. So if we got an answer by February, I think it could be in effect by the end of the year, or maybe even September, depending on how soon. Well, I think all of the readers have been installed already in anticipation, but I will find out.
That'd be very interesting. Rich, and then Doug.
Yeah, a note I put in chat. I feel like we had a very lengthy and contentious discussion about open streets, and then we just abruptly moved on. And I know we're not going to get to a consensus. We're not going to get to unanimity, but I think we need some board resolution that gets approved so that we have some guidance of where things go. And
well, you asked for what's the resolution? We as a board at the very beginning of the crisis called for more open space. So what's the resolution that are you proposing a resolution?
Well,
don't we need to hear from DOT and what
Mark?
Colleen and Helen are going to find out?
Yeah.
From the mayor's office and all of that?
Yeah, because if there isn't a partner, it sounds like if there isn't a partner, then there's nothing to resolve. But don't let me stop. I'm sorry. That's
well, it sounded to me like there was kind of a de facto decision to make it weekends only, to make it 4 p.m. There wasn't a discussion about seasonality. Is that a year-round decision? Is that just for the winter? And then does it change? And I think it would have more weight if we, as a board, discuss especially those 3 things of, weekdays versus weekends, the time that it would close if they do stay open at all, and is there a seasonality component to this?
Yeah. I really appreciate your bringing those up, and of course defer to the board. When I spoke about it, I was assuming just for the winter months, and that, dependent on COVID, dependent on so many things, that we reevaluate when the seasons, when it starts getting lighter and it's a different situation again.
It starts getting lighter December 22nd.
Yeah, I meant like April or May, kind of like when it opened in the first place. So but you're right, Rich. I didn't ask for anything formal. I turn over to the board.
But and that's a question of, would it have more weight if we did do something formal? And obviously, there's.
I think it's highly improper to propose a resolution.
Can we talk in order?
At this hour without public notice.
First of all, this was clearly public notice. It was on the agenda.
There was public notice.
Second of all, Jay, I'm talking.
There was public notice of a discussion.
Jay, I'm talking.
Not a resolution.
Jay, I'm talking.
I know you're
I'm talking.
Rich. You've been talking.
Go ahead, Rich.
Okay, and to be clear, that was not me who just muted Jay, but thank you, whoever did. So I think that, given that there's disagreement and different people claiming different views from the community, I think that we should have a board resolution so that, as always, majority wins. And I think, if I'm in the minority, so be it. But I think we need to have a view of the community.
Well, I'll defer to Andrew and Mark. I don't really see what we would resolve at this point. We need more information. There's a lack of a community partner.
Yeah, I would want the information.
Yeah, we're on record as being in favor of the open streets. So I don't really see there's what we can do at this point. I think Helen and Colleen have a good sense of what the issues are, and I think we should await more information. Mark and Andrew, do you want to weigh in on that?
I agree with you, Howard. I would like to get more info, and also, if there's no community partner, I think that answers that in many ways. Doug, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, well, I was going to say something before about the open streets, just that a neighbor of mine asked me to mention that apropos of possibly closing it earlier in the dark, there seems to be a problem. She lives on West End Avenue with her, she's a single parent with 2 daughters, and says that regularly she hears cars striking the barricades at night. And it actually has woken her up multiple times. So I am concerned about the lack of visibility and signage. And then now, being that it gets dark at 4:30, I would support shutting it down earlier. That's all. And then as the season comes back and the daylight comes back, but that was not why I raised my hand. But on the new business, I guess we're following up. Andrew, perhaps you have an answer to this. What's that? This is old business. Okay, right. So this is actually old business. This is something we discussed last month. I don't know if Andrew, if you had a chance to go back to the board or ask about the enforcement of masks. I am concerned now we have an uptick in New York. We actually have a slight uptick in Lincoln Square. And I am personally non-scientific observing on the M7, M11, M57, M51, M104, and the 123 subways. I have yet to see a single MTA officer, anyone approaching anyone not wearing a mask. In fact, I actually on a southbound 104 saw the driver without a mask and very, very politely asked him why he was not wearing his mask. And he told me in the most snippy of tones, get behind the white line. He didn't have his identification on. I have his bus number, but he wasn't wearing a mask, and he didn't wear a mask for about 3 miles that I took the bus.
Give me that number when we're offline, Doug. And
but the question is,
was he in his plastic bubble though?
Well, he had the plastic shield, yes, but but my question, I mean, that's obviously seems to be an anomaly. Most drivers are protecting themselves and others, but I have yet to see any enforcement, and I regularly see people without their masks, and I'd like to know to date how many summonses have been issued, why we have an uptick now. Why, if we want the MTA, we want people to support the MTA and to come back and feel safe, besides this incredible technology that you described, which I'm really excited about, where is the enforcement? I am nervous.
Okay, I can answer you. I have seen a few enforcer or NYPD tell people to leave without a mask. I saw one actually at the 96th Street station the other day tell somebody, you're not getting on this train without a mask. They left the station. Mask compliance is relatively high in the 97 to 99%. Now, there's occasionally somebody who doesn't have their nose covered, unfortunately, or has the mask around their neck, which doesn't help anybody. But it's very high. I would also give you the ease of mind that in a subway and bus, there is a replenishment of the air so frequently, and the Sam Schwartz Company has even issued a report. You are much safer in a bus or train than you are in a store or a restaurant because of the number of times per hour that the air is replenished. So yes, we want everyone to wear a mask, but it doesn't mean you're going to get something if you don't. But obviously, we want everyone to wear a mask.
Yeah, actually, it was an HVAC specialist that told me, and he's not an MTA HVAC specialist, but that in the rear of the bus, there's a intake that pulls back the recirculated air. If you're actually sitting right behind the intake, all the air that's in the bus is going to your face to suck back to then get recycled. So actually, if someone is not wearing a mask and they're talking, that particulate matter actually comes right back into your face. So I just haven't seen anybody doing it. And the bus drivers who I've spoken to, most of them have been very polite and kind, have told me that unofficially they're not allowed to really intercede with anyone.
No, they're not.
But they can refuse and they can take the bus out of service, but that's obviously very impractical. So anyway,
Yes.
thanks.
I can get you the breakdown of enforcement on bus versus subway in a day or two.
People have to be safe and feel safe in order for
Absolutely.
the come back. Thank you.
Any other follow-up on existing business? I have one. Colleen, at the beginning of September, the board asked for a better plan for West 72nd Street. I was wondering what's going on with that. Colleen, are you still
Jog
there?
my memory, Howard, a better plan on West 72nd for what?
Yeah, it was to reconfigure 72nd to make it more pedestrian friendly, install protected bike lane. Right now, 72nd Street is, I'm down that street very
Oh,
frequently.
yes, now my memory serves me. I think we are still looking into that, yes, our bikes division. Let me follow up with them.
Actually,
It makes a lot of sense, Colleen.
Yeah, and we asked for really a rethinking of the whole street. It just doesn't work the way it is now. When could we expect that plan? It's just been over 2 months, and especially given COVID, that there's much more use of the street, and it's a major.
Let me find out from Ted and his colleagues. Let me find out from Ted Wright and his colleagues, and I'll get back to you.
Okay, you'll get back
Just
to me.
to
Thanks,
jump right
Colleen.
in really quickly, Colleen, I also want to bring up the fact that we should definitely consider the M72 bus. I recently took the M72 bus from 66 and West End Avenue, trying to go to the Upper East Side, and halfway I gave up. I got off on 72nd Street, rode a city bike across town. So riding the bus was not fun. Going through 72nd Street. So I think a bike lane is good, but I think the bus is way more important to get massive group of people across town.
William, what was blocking the bus? Was it traffic or?
It was double
trucks or
parked trucks taking up the entire lane.
There is a wall of double parked cars on both sides of the street.
There was a wall of parked cars and there was a wall of double parked traffic supporting local businesses, and one lane for traffic to go through, which was the bus. So as a person who rides the bike frequently, I find it more suitable and appropriate to have bike lanes on 73rd or 71st, not 72nd. It's too busy, the streets are too narrow. We can do it, but we will just then, the whole street would have to change completely. So I think the bus is there. I think a bus lane would be more appropriate, in my opinion.
We already fought that battle. We had the community board voted overwhelmingly for it.
We did.
And the resolution included a call for more loading zones on 72nd.
That's fine. I'm not calling for a new resolution. I'm just bringing a point of information for Colleen and the Department of Transportation to do more research. It's up to her to listen to our resolution.
We will. Once we have a proposal, we'll come with all that information.
Hey, William?
Thank you. Yeah.
Others have told me, and I've made the suggestion, from where you were going from West 72nd to East 72nd, it's actually faster to take a downtown 2 or 3 express to Times Square and an uptown Q to 72nd and 2nd. You wouldn't believe how much time you save.
Yeah, I actually was considering taking the M66, but I have to be in 79th Street. But
guys,
we have a lot to do here. Just let me add that, Colleen, we really look forward to something great. None of us are traffic engineers. You work with traffic engineers. We're looking for something great. Any other follow-up?
Helen has her hand up.
Who?
Helen Rosenthal, our council member.
Oh, Helen.
I just want to, is Doug Kleiman still on? Hey, Doug, I wanted to respond to something that you said, just to have the opportunity to do it. We've looked into the high percentage of COVID cases in 10069. We spoke with the Department of Health about it. It's apparently 2 families. So it's not a community spread issue. It's literally 2 families. The population there is pretty low, but it's 9 people out of 260 some that were tested. And all of that information, by the way, everyone can find on the DOH website. It's really quite great. They get into details by zip code. So for anyone listening, not to worry about 10069. There are some very worrisome zip codes, but that's not one of them.
Thank you, Helen.
Thanks, Helen.
We have Rich Robbins and then Jessica Spiegel from the community would like to speak. Rich?
Yeah, once again, we moved on, and I want to propose a resolution, just to see what people think about it. But number one, we continue to support open streets. We support making them weekends only for the winter. The daily ending time should be tied to sunset. We call on local partners to support the open streets. We call on DOT to add official 5 mph and local traffic only signs. We could discuss whether we want to call on NYPD to enforce the open streets. I did see someone post in chat that they want nothing to do with it. So that's a question. And we might want to ask Helen and DOT to consult with CB7 before making any changes. So curious if people think that's a worthwhile resolution. And if so, if anyone seconds it.
Is there a second? If there is no second, we don't go ahead with it. Okay, Jessica Spiegel, you were gonna have to unmute yourself.
Jessica already spoke. What?
Sorry. I thought it was a new hand. Any other hands up, Mark? Because I don't always see them.
There was a hand up before. Maybe we should call on Jessica quickly just to make sure it's not on the same topic. So I'll just ask you to unmute this time.
Oh, no, sorry, that was a leftover. I didn't know I needed to unraise my hand. I'm sorry.
Very good. Thank you very much. So
Thank
there
you.
was somebody who wanted new business, and that was Sanjeev. I'm sorry, is it Mehta? Sanjeev Mehta? I can't seem to find him now, of course.
Sanjeev Mehta, yes.
Do you have him? Can you
I
unmute
see him,
him?
but Sanjeev, can you unmute?
Oh, here he is. Let's make him a panelist. And I do have some slides of his if you'll allow me to show them. But it's a very finite issue. And I don't propose we spend a lot of time on it, but I think it's fair that we hear from him because he did try to, he has been hanging around for new business.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. There are two of us on this issue on this call. We represent 5 Riverside Drive and 11 Riverside Drive, and we sit on 73rd Street between West End Avenue and Riverside Drive. Our building, I'm a director of the board of the building, sits all the way from West End to Riverside, and 5 Riverside Drive has about half the block on the opposite south side of the street. Both of our buildings have their main entrances on the street and not on the riverside. There has been a long-standing problem that migrated to our street about a year plus ago, where we get a line of taxi cabs that during the COVID obviously went away, but it's starting to come back. And this creates a significant issue for our building because often, and this happens regularly whenever we have a lot of elderly people, ambulances cannot get through on our building when cars are double parked. And this double parking is created simply because of the accessibility of our street that the New York Police Department somehow has ordained double parking legal on our street without any signage or any indication to the local community. Our submission is that it would be easier if this is what the city desires for them to allow these cars to go park on 72nd Street or use Riverside Boulevard South, which sees almost no traffic, and the west side of that street does not block any building. There are 1,000+ people who live in our building, and there's a significant number in the buildings across the street. And our delivery vans can't get through. The post office guy has to either park on Riverside, which is a problem, or he double parks on West End Avenue, which at least in the rush hours, which is when he's sitting there for 2 to 3 hours, creates a huge problem on West End Avenue too.
Is this only certain days of the week? Is this related to the mosque and its services?
Yes, it is related to the mosque, but it started off as a Friday thing. Then it became a daily thing to the point where halal vendors started setting up shop on the street. And our fear is when you go back to full service levels, they're going to be there every day from 9 a.m. to about 8 p.m. Fridays, it gets really bad.
Yeah, Friday's the day I expected it would be bad. Yeah.
But it is full every day of the week. You can walk out anytime in the afternoon and there is chaos on that street. Vans come in, they think they'll get through, they scrape the cars on the sides, they try to back out. Children are coming and going at about that time from school. This is a major safety issue.
Clary has brought it up. She lives right near there.
Yeah, this has to stop. I mean, I don't know of how many other religious reasons people get. I don't see this happening in front of any other religious community. The synagogues are open, the churches are open. You don't see parking all over the place simply to accommodate this. And the police just simply says, we're not going to do anything about it. I've talked to patrolmen, I've talked to cars parked over there, and they say, so if there is an official city edict, show me the legal edict under which this is allowed. Change the signage on the street and say, double park at your will, and make it open for everybody then. So we have delivery people coming in, let them be able to double park without getting tickets.
Colleen, are you still on? Or did we lose?
I'm on.
You're on.
I'm on. Sorry.
You've heard this complaint before from various.
I have many times, and bolts back to enforcement.
Well, are we going to wait till somebody dies because the ambulance couldn't get there?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Exactly.
Then
we'll raise this with the 20th precinct again, but signage we may need certain kinds of signage to.
What are you going to say on the sign? That you are allowed to double park here?
No, double parking not permitted. Or set aside a space like you said on Riverside South, Riverside Boulevard South, where there are spaces.
It is a much wider boulevard. Even 72nd Street, where they used to park earlier, we used to see them parked there. Then the police started enforcing no parking on 72nd Street and happily gave them license to park here. And all of this seems to have been very informal with no notification to the residents involved.
So Andrew, would you like me to just give the 2-minute?
Oh yeah, sure, Helen. I didn't know you were.
Yes. Sure. So there was a lot of community outreach, actually. This became a major issue 2 years ago, and the police flyered every single building on 70 West 73rd around, from West End over to Riverside, West 72nd and West 71st. And the decision was made, and yes, it is because the mosque is there, and there are 2 mosques that taxi drivers can stop at. There's a fruit fly. One on the Upper East Side, one on the Upper West Side. The Upper West Side is the one you live nearby. Yes. And during the time of when the Muslim ban started, when Trump came into office, there was a lot of discrimination against the taxi drivers and against Muslims in general. And there was it was more the case that the taxi drivers came to the mosque on West 72nd to pray, 5 times a day. And the decision, there were many meetings about this. I'm sorry if you were not involved, but there were many, many meetings about it, and different solutions tried. And what the NYPD finally came up with as the best solution was to encourage the drivers not to double park on West 72nd, because that is the entry to the highway, but to use Riverside Boulevard freely. And you'll see that there are taxis lined up there.
They are only lined up.
Let the council member finish. Let them out.
Please let her finish.
Yeah.
Now, and use West 73rd and West 71st. Now, if you're saying that's not happening and Clary's bringing it up again as an issue, we should, appreciate coordinating this with the community board. We should bring it up again with the 20th precinct. And, we should revisit the issue. But this was an agreement made between the mosque, the 20th precinct, and the neighbors to do just this.
And you did mean Riverside Boulevard as opposed to Riverside Drive, right?
We represent 80%
Because
of the
73rd Street
population.
is Riverside Drive, not Boulevard. Yeah.
We represent 80% of the
73rd
population on
Street
73rd Street.
Is on the drive, yes.
Drive, yes.
The point is that it was to be moved over to the boulevard. And again.
And is that a safe walk? If you parked on Riverside Boulevard to get to the mosque, you do have to cross a lot of traffic, but there are lights and what have you.
And there are zebras, right?
Yes,
So you can
zebras,
cross
okay.
at
You
the-
have to cross one traffic light. If you park on the west side of Riverside Boulevard, you can park all the way down to 60th Street.
Yeah, I mean, one of
Only-
the problems with this.
There's only one traffic light you would have to cross at.
Okay,
and that's at
let the
72nd
council
and
members speak,
Riverside.
please.
It's 9:07. And I don't mean to hijack your meeting. I could actually talk about this for a while.
And I've been waiting all evening to get this issue tabled.
Yeah, no, we should.
And I represent 1,000 people.
You don't mean you've waited to get it tabled, you've waited to get it heard, which is what we're doing right now.
Well,
he
let's
doesn't
move this
want
forward.
it to be tabled. Andrew, you're great. So, no, we should bring it up again. I mean, we have to.
I'm
involve the
grateful that you would do that.
Yeah. we
Let's
have
talk to all the
involve-
parties again.
Yeah. And I would love Andrew, for your committee and Howard to be a part of this. That'd be
We will.
super helpful.
We absolutely will.
Yeah, I've seen this
Thank
problem
you.
myself.
Yeah.
And we will get back to you, Sanjeev, when we hear news.
Or he
Well,
should
I would
come to
hope
the
you would
meeting.
get back
Oh,
proactively
yeah, or maybe
before
you could
that.
be invited to the meeting.
Yeah, you should come to the meeting, Sanjeev, that we.
Well,
set
my
up.
contact details are now with you.
Okay.
And
Great.
it's a very simple email address at schwabhouse.com. We are a resident
you're at
community of,
Schwab. Okay.
we are 650 apartments and, another 100 so
Yeah, sure.
across the street.
Yeah.
I mean, we are talking about 90% of the population that is on that street. And we don't feel we were adequately consulted or informed. And I sit on the board of the building and I had no clue that we had
Sanjeev, you've heard, if you've been on listening to this meeting tonight, you've heard that safety is a priority of this committee. And this is a safety matter and we will be
Major.
moving forward with it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the beginning of the solution. Ken has his hand up. No? Okay. We have
Chris, go ahead.
Chris
Giordano and, yeah, right, okay. Let me get him ready to speak. Go ahead.
Chris?
Hi, thank you. While we have the council member and Ms. Chattergoon, I wanted to get some help or guidance for the construction site on 65th and 66, which Judge Engeron voided the permit for at the end of September. It seems to us in the neighborhood that we should be able to have the sidewalk and streets restored, as well as the crane taken away. There hasn't been work on the site for almost a year and a half, and now they have no permit. So and we've had a lot of support from CV7, and we appreciate that, but we're hoping that we can get some help or guidance from you on what we should do to move forward with this.
And if I could just add to, I'm sorry, Helen, let me just add one more thing. You probably have it somewhere in your inbox, but we wrote a letter to the commissioners of, the borough commissioners of transportation and buildings, making the case that since the permit was revoked, that there's no basis to have these obstructions on a very busy corridor, both the crane and the usual construction fence encroachments. So that's the backdrop there.
Mark, thank you so much. Could you bump that up and resend it? As you know, I just have a new chief of staff starting. And so there are emails that are slipping between the cracks, and I'm happy to help follow up on this issue. So thank you for bringing it up, Chris. And of course, you've done a yeoman's job on this, Chris.
Oh, you're kind.
it's
Thank you.
phenomenal.
And thank you for your help.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I did. Now I have my hand up.
Okay, Ken.
Just getting back to the West End Avenue for a second. Would it be, it sounds like changing the barricades at sundown is going to happen. So I'm just wondering if we could ask Helen and Colleen if they're going to be doing anything beyond that to come back to us first.
Yeah,
Yeah, we would share whatever information we have with the community board. Yeah.
Before a decision is made?
About the weekend or about the low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, about what you're calling about the weekend. And
yeah, definitely about the weekend. Sure, absolutely.
In other words, the termination of it to something else.
Yeah, and Ken, I get 100 emails a day, but text me. You have my cell. So if I don't bring something up, just text me. It's not a problem, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have, Colleen or anybody, are there reflectors on these barricades?
There should be, yes, especially now that it gets dark early. Yeah.
They're very light. They're really hard to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are not I mean,
good.
That's why having Peter, make his own signs and
Yes.
make sure they're up and watching it every day, that's what's needed.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like a big expense item. There's one more community member who'd like to say something. Kei Kojima. I hope I didn't mangle your name.
That sounds right.
Kei, I unmuted you. You have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Oh, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Kei Kojima. This is my first time joining this meeting, so this has been quite interesting. I'll make this pretty short because it's gotten pretty late and I'm almost ready to get off this call as well. I joined today's call because I'm a new biker. I'm a new city biker. I've never biked in the city streets before. It's way too scary, but I also don't want to, because of the COVID thing, I was too nervous about riding the subways. And I've actually gotten quite used to biking now in the streets. So what happened, I wanted to share my experience with you about what happened to me last Wednesday. I was biking out of the Central Park on 100th Street. And as you know, that's an entry point or exit point that bikers can use. You don't have to dismount your bike. So I'm on a city bike and I was wanting to dock it on 100th and Broadway. There is no good and safe way for a biker, especially a new biker like myself, to go westbound from Central Park West. So I did take a chance and I knew that I was doing the wrong thing by biking in the wrong direction on 100th Street, but I've seen tons of people do it. And frankly, I was pretty much just following everybody else out of the park going west on 100th. And I got stopped by a cop in front of the 24th precinct and I got ticketed. So yeah, it stinks that I got a ticket, but that's not really the issue that I'm coming here to talk about. The issue that I'd like to talk about is has there been any conversation about biking paths that go westbound that's safe, somewhere like something that can be accessible by bikes between 97th and 106th? Because I know that 97th does go westbound, but I've tried it and it's scary. There's traffic shooting across from the transverse. And the 97th Street narrows once you hit Columbus Avenue. So then you're, really tight in there with all the traffic. And then going up to 106th Street, I mean, there's got to be a better solution. Also, I think that I know that there's also a lot of complaints about reckless bikers. And I'm one of those complainers too. Like, I have biked up Amsterdam Avenue, and there are people on electric bikes whizzing downward. Down opposite the direction of traffic. Sometimes they're on their cell phones. And so that's, disconcerting as well. So I wondered if, I got ticketed because, there's a lot of complaints about these reckless or dangerous bikers. And I don't think it really, there must be another way to address those bikers other than ticketing somebody like me. So anyway, those are just the points I want to share with you all.
Thank you, Kay. Ken, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Kay is absolutely right. And unfortunately, this is not in Helen's district, so we can't bug her about it. But there is no place for a cyclist between 97th and 105th to go west. There is an entrance and exit to Central Park at 100th Street, and there is a city bike dock at 100th Street and Broadway. It makes, and there's city bike docks along the way on 100th Street. So it makes so much sense to put a bike lane there. And the solution would be to put what's known as a counterflow lane, and just make it legal for cyclists to go both ways there. The one problematic section of it is where the block of the precinct and the fire department, which, if anybody has been there, is pretty much a parking lot with double and sometimes triple parked, mostly police and personal police vehicles. And I'm not sure whether that all is necessary, but it certainly is necessary to have a westbound route at somewhere between 97th and 105th, because otherwise cyclists are just using it anyway, and the police are just walking out the door of the precinct and issuing tickets when they feel like it, which in these cases is very unfair. So I would like to put this on the agenda for next month.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. And Kay, I would like to make a more general point. There's a paradox about enforcement against cyclists. There are some incredibly reckless, menacing cyclists out there, but they're not the ones who are stopped by the police. Invariably, it's the cyclist who slows down at the red light, looks around, make sure there's no one there, and then proceeds. It gets caught because they can be caught. They're going slowly. The cyclist that menacingly goes through and recklessly through the red light isn't stopped. In a way, this can even encourage more reckless behavior. I don't have an answer. It's just an observation I've had. And unfortunately, you're one of the cyclists that fell into that first category of not posing a threat. I saw your email, and you noted that people went by while you were there who were going by in a reckless way, and the police didn't do anything. And so I think we need to think through, and it's late in the day, in the night actually, and we're not going to have an answer tonight, how we really rein in the reckless behavior and don't penalize the people who, although they technically violate the rules, don't really pose a threat, and therefore potentially embolden other people to be more reckless.
And Kay, I would say, give the subway another try. It's cleaner than you've ever remembered.
Okay, I may do that. Thank you. Yes. But thank you for listening.
We should all have options. We should all have an option. Anything else?
Andrew, can we make sure that once the pandemic is over, the grit returns? I'd feel lost without it.
What returns?
The grit on the subway.
Oh, the grid, yeah. I don't think so. I think we learned a lot with the cleaning we're doing.
I think that's about it for tonight, unless anyone has something else. Thank you so
all.
much.
Thank you all.
Have a great night and thanks for participating. Take care.
Yes, indeed. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.